Hi, this episode of The Comics Alternative, one of the most insightful and intelligent comic podcasts out there, is brought to you in part with the support of Patreon pledges from listeners like me, Sal Goodsam. Patreon is a crowdfunding platform that helps content providers generate some income for content they often give away for free, like this show. As a comic artist, I use it myself. It's been a huge help in making ends meet, and I'm super pleased to be able to pass some of that on via my own pledges to a number of other creators like Derek and Andy, so they too can enrich our cultural landscape. Become a patron of the arts and letters. Pledge today at patreon.com/comicsalternative.
This is The Comics Alternative, episode 177, a look at the March Previews catalog. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Comics Alternative. I'm Derek.
And I'm Paul, and we're two scholars with PhDs or in progress talking about comics.
That's right. And it is the beginning of March, and that must mean it's time to look at the current previews catalog. But before we get into that, we want to let all of you guys know that this episode of the Comics Alternative is brought to you by the great folks at Discount Comic Book Service. Go to their website, dcbservice.com, for all of your comics pre-ordering needs. There, you're going to find all DC, Marvel, Image, and Dark Horse titles at 40% off the cover price if you pre-order. For all of the other publishers, you'll find that those discounts are 20 to 35% off cover price, and every single month you're going to find some unbelievable specials. Sometimes those specials will be at 45% off cover price, sometimes at 50% off cover, but often you can find discounts that are quite a bit more impressive than that.
Yeah, among those unbelievable specials that I definitely partake in every month, you're going to find Vertigo bundles. You're going to find this last month in February we saw an Aftershock bundle, and so you're going to be able to get whole lines, whole groups of comics at, as you said, Derek, incredible discounts. And so definitely encourage you to check out DCBS, check out those bundles.
That's right. It's a great place to get comics. That's dcbservice.com. You gotta go there for all of your comics pre-ordering needs. And after you do get your comics there, please send them an email and tell them that the two guys with PhDs sent you. And you know, Paul, as people are waiting for their comics to arrive, they can take the time to brew a great cup of coffee. And one of the best places to get that coffee is Just Coffee Co-op, another one of our sponsors for this episode. Just Coffee Co-op, it's a great place to get coffee, tea, and chocolates. All of their coffee is 100% fair trade, it's shade-grown, and it's organic certified. Everything is roasted in small batches. There is no mass production whatsoever.
What you want to do is you want to go to justcoffee.coop. You want to find the place where you can enter a coupon code, enter comics, and you get a 10% discount on any order, no minimum. Shipping is free. And I got to tell you, Derek, I knew about Just Coffee before they sort of signed on with us here at Comics Alternative, but I really began sort of regularly shopping there since they partnered with us, and it's been great. I brought a couple of batches to my workplace of half calf that I'm addicted, and my colleagues were impressed. They were pretty impressed. They said, "Hey, somebody brought the good stuff here." So it's exciting to support a company whose coffee is made, I think, with social consciousness. If that's something that is on your mind, it's on my mind for sure. I drink a ton of coffee, and just knowing the way that it's sourced and managed, it's a comfort.
Yeah, and it's good that you used Just Coffee Co-op before, but whether you are a first-time coffee drinker from Just Coffee Co-op or you're coming back, definitely use our coupon code COMICS, that's COMICS, and you will get 10% off of your order. That's justcoffee.coop. You got to go there for some great coffee, tea, and chocolates. It's a great place to get caffeinated.
Most definitely.
So, Paul, our listeners of our podcast may know who you are, but they may not have heard your voice before. So let's go ahead and introduce you. This is the first time that you have co-hosted an episode of the podcast, but you're not new to the Comics Alternative.
Yeah, I'm a longtime listener. It's a huge honor to be here. Thank you, Derek, for inviting me. And longtime listener, and I've become the editor of the blog portion on the comicsalternative.com website. Check it out if you haven't already. And I've been doing that for the last few months, trying to drum up some reviews and contributions, commentary that we have on the blog. And it's good to be here. I love listening to you and Derek. I'm sorry, you and Andy and Gene and the whole crew. And so it's fun to be in the seat.
Yeah, and also for a preview show. And it's interesting in that every now and again our preview, well, it's getting to be quite often, our preview shows tend to go long. So I hope that this being your first episode of the podcast, it doesn't scare you off.
It's going to might be a marathon, but no, it's all exciting talk.
Yeah, and I do want to underscore the fact that you are the new blog editor, and for our listeners, you may or may not be aware of the fact that not only is the Comics Alternative a podcast, but we also have a vibrant blog, and we do a variety of reviews and comics-related commentary that we post on the blog, as well as text-based interviews as well.
Yes.
And in fact, Paul is the guy to contact if you're possibly interested in being a reviewer for the Comics Alternative. We do have standards, and so Paul would need to see some samples of your writing and get to know you a little bit, but we're always looking for great contributions, people who can write well and write intelligently about non-mainstream superhero comics.
Absolutely. Please get in touch, Paul at comicsalternative.com. I'd love to get to know you and see your work. And, I really hope that the blog is similar to the Comics Alternative listening crew, a vibrant community of folks interested in comics, interested in talking about what we talk about here on the podcast. Sometimes the blog is the Robin to the Batman that is the podcast, but we try to keep it interesting and light and folks to bring their intellectual interest to this field that we love to study. That's why we're here.
Well, Paul, let's get into the March Previews catalog. And as you well know, what we do is we go through the catalog from the beginning. We definitely don't look at everything because we just don't have that much time in life. But we highlight what we consider titles that, whether or not each of us are going to get them, it's something worth mentioning, even if we're not going to be picking up those comics or pre-ordering them through Discount Comic Book Service. And we should point out that at the time of this recording, Discount Comic Book Service's specials for March are not up yet.
Right.
But we can guarantee you that a good bit, maybe much more than half, of the titles that we highlight are going to be seriously discounted. Now, all of them are going to be discounted, but when we say serious, we're talking about, 40, 45%. They do a lot of great discounts, and so we're going to be highlighting some stuff, and when DCB Service gets their March specials up, you'll see that much of what we are discussing today will be discounted deeply. Deeply and truly.
Deeply and truly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and to be honest, I don't know if there's any other crazy fans like me out there, but I sit there with the catalog, with DCBS open, listening to the previews pods that we do here, and sort of fill my order sheet as I go. To be honest, it guides a lot of my buying, so it's
That's good to hear.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's really good. And, you're not the only one who has said something like that to me before. Every now and again, I'll get emails from people who do say that if they don't go through their order form as they're listening to the podcast, then they keep the podcast in mind or they take notes and then they order. Or they go back and listen to the podcast again as they're ordering. So that's cool. We want to be your tasteful comics guide.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So in terms of tastefully guiding you, dear listener, we're going to be starting in the first section of the previews catalog, and that is the Dark Horse section. And Paul, where do you go first in Dark Horse?
I start right at the beginning, actually. There's a new series, a new Lobster Johnson series, and I think I've heard you mention, but not talk much about Mignola and the whole Hellboy universe. Are you a partaker in that? Are you a reader at all?
Yes, I am, but I'm a reader who is sorely behind on my Hellboy, and
it's a lot of reading to catch up on.
Yeah, I kept up with Hellboy up until about maybe 3 or 4 years ago, and it kind of snowballed after that. You know, I got behind a little bit, then a little bit more, and then before I knew it, a couple of volumes had passed, and so I thought, okay, eventually I'll get back to it. Now, curiously enough, this is around the same time that we really got into the action of this podcast, and my reading habits have changed dramatically in terms of comics since we started the podcast, because now I have to do a lot of my reading for the podcast, which means that a lot of reading outside of the podcast, for my own enjoyment, I may not get as much time, or at least take the effort to do that. And unfortunately, Hellboy took a hit.
Yeah.
Now, all of that's just to say, I love Hellboy. I love the Hellboy universe. I just haven't kept up with it. So this Lobster Johnson is one you'd recommend.
It is, because I agree with you. I kind of read it early on. And since they started coming out, Dark Horse started coming out with those library editions that are just huge and beautiful. I've been trying to catch up, sort of keep up with the universe. It's a huge corpus. And, if listeners out there find that they can't keep up, it's understandable. And so there's a sense of this high barrier to catch up with everything. I think that's one of the reasons why Lobster Johnson appeals to me, because it's set in you can see actually right from the cover art, there's a kind of pulpy, 1930s, 1940s quality to the stories. It's within the chronology, within the universe, but not. And so if you're like me, somewhat uninitiated to the universe, it's actually not a bad entry point. And so, even each of the series, which tend to be, 4-issue, 5-issue series, in this case, it's a Lobster Johnson, Metal Monsters of Midtown, first of 3, pretty accessible. I don't think you have to have a huge amount of the background knowledge to enjoy it. And I got to say, written by John Arcudi, colors, of course, by, Dave Stewart, who's a master. But the art is by Tanchi Zanjic. I don't know if you're familiar with his work. He's done a number of things at Image, and he's done a few of the previous Lobster Johnson series. Just love his work. If you're a fan of the sort of Chris Samnee type of art, that sort of Toth legacy, that simplicity, that cleanness of line, the good use of shadows. He's one to watch. So I'm definitely looking forward to this one.
Well, on the topic of Mike Mignola, if you turn the page, my first highlight of the March catalog is on page 51, and that is Joe Gollum, a cult detective. And this story is The Rat Catcher and the Sunken Dead. Now, this collects the 5-issue miniseries that's just about, I guess this series is just about to wrap up in single issues. And now, I did not read Mignola and Christopher Golden's prose version of Joe Gollum, but I did read the first 1 or 2 issues of this series, and I love it.
Yeah, it's pretty good. I also caught the first couple of issues of this.
Yeah. So now you get this first volume, and it's a hard copy, Joe Gollum, A Cult Detective, The Rat Catcher, and The Sunken Dead. And it says Volume 1, so what that tells me is that we may get more Joe Gollum.
Yeah, it sounds like it. I mean, they have this way of spinning off these series, and it's just a proliferating universe, tends to... Yeah, actually, these pages of previews attest to that. There's just a lot of ongoing stuff. And I got to say, as a kid, I would lurk around the library and read these reprints of, old pulp novels and stuff like that. And there was a lot of things that were problematic about reading that, first of all, as a kid. Second of all, just, with modern sensibilities, what I love about these books is that they have I think brought back a lot of the intriguing aspects of that kind of work. You know, you look at the cover art for this Joe Golem book, it just kind of, you know, that aroma of the pulp novel is there. You know,
Yeah.
It's brought back a lot of that without some of the baggage that I have trouble with sometimes.
Yeah, and the art on this is by Patrick Reynolds and Joe Golem. You know, also on that
Beautiful.
page is something else I wanted to highlight, and that is Evan Dorkin and Jill Thompson's one-shot Beasts of Burden, What the Cat Dragged In. Now, Dorkin and Thompson have been doing Beast of Burden for a number of years now, and in fact, they've even won Eisner Awards for this. But this is a one-shot. So I love the Beast of Burden series. I especially like the work of Evan Dorkin, and as a way to serve as a teaser, Gene and I, pretty darn soon, are going to be doing an interview with Evan Dorkin.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
That's great. Yeah. I like Beast of Burden too. Really good work. Mr. Dorkin's got incredible range. I can't wait to hear, you know, if you get a chance to ask him when he wakes up in the morning, how does he decide which parts of his work he's gonna do? I mean, they all sort of have, you know, a certain sense of humor, sometimes a certain darkness, you know, but his range is incredible.
Yeah. So, Paul, where do you go next?
I go next to page 55. Is that you have anything before that?
No.
Okay. All right. 55. It's Mystery Girl Volume 1. Written by Paul Tobin, art by Alberto Albuquerque, and Marissa Louise covers. And this is a series that debuted pretty recently, and this is the sort of first trade collection. I was intrigued by this because, you know, Paul Tobin's written a ton of stuff that I've enjoyed, but it really was the Alberto Albuquerque art. He is the artist on Letter 44, which is an Oni Press book written by Charles Soule. Are you familiar with that book?
Oh, yeah. In fact, I interviewed Soule about a year and a half ago.
Yeah.
It was 2 years.
That's right.
That was fun.
Yeah, he's a fascinating guy. I don't know how he does all that he does, but the art in that book was intriguing to me, and so, you know, that's sort of more in the sci-fi realm. Really interested in how Albuquerque would play in what seems to be more of a maybe mystical sort of maybe crime type of book. I didn't actually read the individual issues. I just sort of flipped through it, and it kind of confirmed for me the way that I think his style, his line has a certain way of weaving a genre story in an interesting way. So I'm excited to read this.
Yeah, you know, like you, I haven't read any of this series, but I've heard very good things about it on other comics-related podcasts that I listen to. And in fact, at one point, and I can't remember which episode it was going to be for, we almost discussed issue number 1 of Mystery Girl, but for whatever reason, something else won out, and we didn't. And so I didn't read that number 1 issue. But again, I've heard really good things from other people about Mystery Girl. So this first volume is coming out, and again, they're calling it Volume 1, so kind of similar to the comment I made about Joe Golem.
Right.
Because they're calling this Volume 1, we may get more Mystery Girl in the future.
Yeah. I got to say, one of the aspects I'm interested in is our protagonist is named Trina Hampstead, and something about I think a woman of color as a protagonist, sort of the style that's represented there in the cover, in terms of it's in terms of her fashion, the way she's staring down these many implements of death on the cover. It's intriguing. I think I'm interested in that kind of representation statement as well.
Yep.
Yeah. Cool.
Now, I have something, if you turn the page on 56, do you have anything else on 55?
No. Let's go to 56.
Yeah, and this is something that I'm interested in, I guess because of the creator, Gene Ha.
Yes.
A very big name. And Frank Cho actually does a variant cover, but this is a Gene Ha publication, and this is a series called May, M-A-E, and this is issue number 1. And the solicit didn't necessarily grab me, but I want to look over it nonetheless. It says, when she was just a girl, Abby discovered a portal to a fantasy world, and for the last couple of years has been having great adventures there, defeating horrible monsters, power-mad scientists, and evil nobles. She was a celebrated action hero. But when she turned 21, it all came apart and she decided to return home. Her sister, May, has just had no idea what happened to Abby all this time. Her tales are too hard to believe. That is, until the monsters and other terrible creatures start to cross over to our world. And then we have a little sample art on page 57. Mm-hmm. The art looks fine, or looks great because it's Gene Ha. Mm-hmm. The solicit is okay. I mean, honestly, it seems interesting, but it doesn't seem to be anything new, anything different than you find in a lot of other comics. But because this is Gene Ha, I'm going to give this a try.
Yeah, I think I am too. And actually what intrigues me is the sort of the publication history, right? Are you familiar with, I think this was a Kickstarter book.
It was?
For a time. I may be getting this wrong. I should probably look it up. But I don't know if it was a Patreon supported or a Kickstarter supported work for a while. And I think this is, Gene Ha bringing it to Dark Horse. And so
I did not know that.
Yeah, I don't think it's I don't think it's just a reprint. I think it may be sort of a continuation. Pardon my ignorance here, but and so any projects that sort of move back and forth between the Diamond distributed realm and the Kickstarter supported realm, I'm really interested in following that as in terms of sort of impact on industry, but as well as kind of a cultural form. So yeah, I'm going to read this too for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Where do you go after that?
I go to page 60.
Cool. I'll follow you there. Go for it.
Yep. Yeah. And this is Mr. X, the Modern Age Limited Edition. This is a large hardcover edition. And what this does, this collects a variety of earlier Mr. X stories, including Condemned, Eviction, and Raised, among other stuff. And, several years ago, when it was still in print, I got from Dark Horse the Mr. X archives, which had collected, all the original Mr. X material, which is really good. Mm-hmm. Now, it's been a long time since I got that. I cannot remember for the life of me how much that originally sold for. This one, Mr. X, the Modern Age Limited Edition, is going for, and this is without any discounts, $100,
right?
And it's about the same size because I checked on Amazon and the Mr. X archives was around 360, 350 some.
Right.
This one, according to previews, is 368 pages. I could almost guarantee you I didn't pay $100 for that Mr. X archive. So I don't know if I'm going to be able to get this one. Now, again, I'm sure we'll get a really good discount from Discount Comic Book Service. Even then, though, I don't know. If I'm able to, I will. But the intention is there. The desire to get this really nice limited edition hardcover Mr. X, the Modern Age. I'd like to.
Yeah. This is one of the things I blame you, Derek. This is one of the things that when I go through the previews catalog, I see a book like this. I think about my kids' college savings fund. It's a temptation.
Okay, so when your wife gets on your case, when your family disowns you, when your daughter years from now is weeping, because she has no education, and she's having to sweep floors, you can always say, it's Derek and Andy's fault. They're the ones who started this damn comics alternative thing.
Man. But I Dark Horse generally does like a really solid job with production. It looks like these are signed too. It says at the bottom, limited to 500 copies, each signed by Dean Motter.
That's why they're 100.
Yeah, one of those extra pages is for the signature. But I don't know. I don't think I'll partake this time. It's tempting.
Yeah. So what about you? Where do you go next?
I'm not till page 66. Do you have anything before that?
No,
All right.
Not.
Well, on 66, Brendan McCarthy's Dream Gang trade paperback. And I don't know if this was on your radar. So it's a series that's been in Dark Horse Presents. And I generally keep up with Dark Horse Presents, probably a couple months late. And I got to tell you, it's usually it's kind of feast or famine for me to read that anthology. I mean, I love anthologies. Just the flavor of the very different books that are out there. But Dream Gang kind of jumps like it's almost an eyesore that you can't ignore. You look at the sample art and the cover there. Just heavy use of psychedelic colors. I think Brendan McCarthy is doing something really interesting in the series. I didn't finish the whole series in Dark Horse Presents. I think I'm gonna get this collection. You'll hear today a lot of things that I'm not generally into, and I'm not generally into the psychedelic sort of acid trip look that's represented here. But actually, as I started to read it, I realized that kind of around through the surface there's a pretty captivating and I think very very humane story underneath. Mm-hmm. So I'm excited to read it kind of collected in whole. So I'm gonna get that one.
This is one of the great, and I've said this before on this show, in fact, many times, this is one of the great things about going through the previews catalog with someone else on these podcasts, because either things I overlook or things I forget to highlight. And when I originally went through the catalog trying to decide, okay, what do I want to bring up when Paul and I do the show, I meant to dog-ear the page where Dream Gang comes up, but I didn't, and I would have completely skipped over it had you not brought it up. Huh. So thank you, my friend.
Yeah, it'll be fun. We should talk about it. I don't know anyone else who's been reading Dream Gang. I haven't heard a lot of chatter about it, so I'll be interested in somebody else's take on it, especially somebody like you.
Yeah. So I have one other thing in Dark Horse.
Yes.
Do you
have
anything else?
Nope.
Okay, I go to page 70, and this is a manga title that I'm not familiar with, but it looks interesting. And this is Wandering Island by Kenji Tsuruta, who does both the writing and the art. And the one page of art that we have, and I guess this is going to be the cover of the book, really looks interesting. Now, it says up at the top, first new work by Kenji Tsuruta, and then parentheses, Spirit of Wonder, in 20 years. And so I think that's what captured my attention. I looked up some of Tsuruta's work, and this is something that Shay and I could potentially discuss on a future episode of the manga show. And I have to tell you that since Shay and I last year started the manga series, every month we look at 2 works of manga.
Yeah.
I have been paying more attention to the manga publisher and manga-related solicits in previews, and I can always count on really good stuff from Dark Horse because they do. I don't read all their manga, but I read a good bit of it that does come out, and we've talked about it on the manga shows in the past. So this is one that I'd like to check out. Again, this is on page 70, and it's Wandering Island.
Yeah. I'll be excited to hear you and Shay talk about it. I've enjoyed the manga show too. I'm also a late. It's kind of funny. I've written about it before, but I was an early comer to Chinese manhwa as a kid. I immigrated when I was a kid to the U.S. And then after I moved to the U.S., sort of almost disavowed manga for a long time for long cultural reasons I won't go into. And so your sort of recent engagement with it kind of parallels mine. Actually, I'd say the last 5 years I've sort of slowly entered into the work that everybody's always talking about, and I just couldn't not read. And so I'll be interested if you guys find this an intriguing work.
Yeah, well, one of the things that brought me closer to manga, my kids. It's not that way so much now, but when they were younger, it's still this way with my daughter, who's a junior in high school now, and she still reads quite a bit of manga. But it used to be this way with my son as well. About the only comics that they would read at all were manga titles, not really Western or U.S. Comics or comic books or graphic novels, whatever you choose to call them. But I thought I have to learn more, and then I became more interested. Now, you were talking about your own history with manga. We should point out that you have a very interesting article, and is it on Multiversity?
That's right, yep.
Where you talk about your personal history, your relationship with manga, and I whether someone is interested in manga or not, I think that they should definitely check out that article that you wrote. So is it easy enough to find on Multiversity if they just go there and look at Paul Lai manga?
Yeah. I do write long-form columns for that site, and you can look at the About page and find my pieces under my name. But thanks for highlighting that. I mean, it's sort of autobiographical, kind of reflecting on the role of manga as a cultural phenomenon in my own life, as an immigrant youth, and and thinking about that very fact. Like I said, and I'll keep this brief, but I read it a ton as a kid, moved to the U.S. Suddenly I was reading, Batman and Ninja Turtles rather than Dragon Ball. And then, not until years later, I'm a high school teacher in the Bay Area, and my students are mostly, Latino youth, and they're going, "Hey, Mr. Lai, have you seen this Dragon Ball?" And it was just a trip, I was like, wow, we've really gone global, and I think that idea of Asian comics as a global phenomenon made it so that I just couldn't not come back to it, as somebody with an interest in comics. And then, it's just fun. Stuff is fun to read. So yeah.
Okay, so if we're both done with Dark Horse, let's turn to the DC Vertigo section. And before we start looking at specific titles, let's say a couple of things about recent news out of DC with their Rebirth line. I've just heard a little bit about it, and I have to tell you, I'm skeptical. Or if not skeptical, then maybe a tad disappointed. We don't talk a whole ton about the superhero stuff in here, but I think if you're interested as a comic scholar, it is something to watch, because I'm going to guess this is some of your thinking. There's probably some overlap in our thinking here, but it seemed like the DCU, sort of soft relaunch after this crazy Convergence event of last year was a little bit more of a, a little bit of more of a reach toward some diversity, titles like Prez, even Batmite, sort of the sensibility there, the Section 8 title. And I guess I'll mention, and I think that's why it's appropriate for you to bring it up today. We're seeing in this section some titles we won't talk about in depth probably, but it's sort of the end of that, as they prepare for this rebirth, which, not to speak badly of Jeff Johns and his vein of work, is honestly not my thing. And it sounds like that's the direction they're heading in, probably for market reasons. Probably, yeah. Probably. You sure?
Yeah.
And I understand that DC is a business, and so they need to do things to sell comics. Of course, that makes sense.
Yeah.
The thing that's sad about this is that I'm not the biggest fan of Marvel, and listeners of the show probably realize this. Mm-hmm. Not that I don't like Marvel titles or Marvel creators. When I say I'm not a fan of Marvel, I mean the company Marvel and what they do. Yeah. The endless relaunches and the new number ones and the titles out or the covers out the wazoo. Yeah. And, the multiple titles on one particular team or one specific hero, and just overdoing it to the hilt. In other words, the shenanigans that they're well known for. And I think that they are a burden to the industry. That's me.
Right.
In doing things like that, I don't think that that's healthy overall.
Right.
And it's a big turnoff. I mean, as much as I like a number of Marvel titles, I have in the back of my head, whether I want to acknowledge it or not, this prejudice against Marvel just because of the business practices. And of course, it doesn't help that they're owned by Disney, which I consider the evil empire.
But you're not the only one.
But all that being said, seeing that with the DC Rebirth, or this relaunch, or whatever the hell it's going to be, they're doing some of the stuff, some of the crap that Marvel has been playing up, to the hilt for the past few years, and it's disappointing.
Yeah.
I was okay to a point with the New 52. I didn't understand it completely, but okay, I got used to it.
Right.
The Convergence, I still have no idea what the hell that was about, outside of, maybe some kind of temporary business-related move.
Right.
And you're right, with this soft post-Convergence I don't want to call it a relaunch, but movement.
Yeah.
It seemed okay. Yeah. I had no problem with it. And, I like the fact that they were trying a number of new titles.
Yeah.
You mentioned Prez and Batmite. I mean, I'm all for coming up with new things, throwing it and see if it sticks to the wall. If it does, fine. If not, at least you tried.
Right.
But if they're going to go back to renumbering everything, while at the same time retaining legacy numberings for some of their bigger titles and properties like Batman and Superman, then
Action and Detective are going back to the original.
What the hell? Yeah, what the hell? I mean, really. I mean, I know that both Detective and Action are, two key titles in DC's history, but so are Batman and Superman. So why not retain those? And then by that legacy numbering, and by that logic, why not other titles?
Yeah.
Flash, Green Lantern, on and on and on. So I don't know.
Yeah. And again, not to get too much into this, we'll call this our superhero. We'll bracket this off as our superhero minute.
Yeah.
But
the superhero rant,
right? The ranting. But I'm disappointed. I don't know if you've read Arnado's book, The Myth of the Superhero. Anyway,
I love that.
Yeah. You reviewed it on the blog, actually, I think. It's a great book. And one of the things that I've said, my summary of it, my paraphrase is that he's kind of saying that the arc of the superhero meta-narrative is a long arc, but it bends toward diversity. Mm-hmm. And I think what was exciting to me about what DC was doing was titles like Dr. Fate, which is, Paul Levitz is an old superhero head, but you had Sonny Liu on art, or they brought in Gene Luen Yang to write Superman, Midnighter, a gay superhero, Omega Men by Tom King. They were doing different things, and I was excited by that, and I think honestly, there wasn't enough time for the audience that was going to reach to even find out and figure out that this was going on in DC. It was sort of like they looked at the returns from the comic shops and decided that, to me, it felt like they had to go a different way. And I think that's regrettable. I think you have to factor in, trade sales and your digital sales, because that audience that I think that they were reaching out toward with some of those titles, you're not going to see those returns in the comic shop sales, So I think that's what I'm disappointed about. I also share some of your, I'll call it curmudgeonliness for myself about the relaunches and so forth. But it's actually, to me, the stretching the boundaries of the possibilities of what superheroes can do, that I think DC was doing some interesting things, and that's what disappoints me.
Yeah. Oh, I'll definitely own up to the curmudgeoniness.
Okay, good. That could be our new tagline.
Yeah.
Two curmudgeons talking about comics.
Exactly. Okay, so all of that being said, I do want to, in the DC, not Vertigo section, mention a couple things, because I don't really consider this a part of the DC universe as most people know it. And these are two titles on pages 80 and 81.
Okay.
And I can tell you, I'm not going to get them, but I do think that this is interesting. On 80, we have issue number 1 of Scooby Apocalypse.
Yep.
This is written by Jim Lee and Keith Giffen, with art by Howard Porter. And then on the facing page is Future Quest number 1. This is written by Jeff Parker with art and cover by Evan Doc Shaner.
Yes.
And now the Scooby Apocalypse, well, the name should explain it. Okay,
yes.
So this has to do with the Scooby-Doo crew.
Yes.
And I have to tell you, I know that Gwen, who does our monthly Young Reader show, and every now and again fills in, thank goodness, on the Comics Alternative, the regular reviews. She's a big fan of Scooby.
Yeah.
I'm not, okay? I grew up with the cartoon, but to me, the shark was jumped early on when they brought in Scrappy-Doo. And from that point forward, from childhood and into adulthood, I don't want to have much to do with Scooby-Doo.
Yeah.
That's me.
Yeah, that Scrappy was a lot of pandering.
Yeah. But I am interested much more in Future Quest, because basically what we have here is a lot of Hanna-Barbera stars from the old cartoons, including Johnny Quest, Space Ghost, and just a whole cast of characters. And this looks really interesting. Now, I love the kind of comedic David Letterman kind of Space Ghost.
Right.
But if you like the classic, and the classic's okay. Again, another plug for Evan Dorkin, because he and his wife worked on Space Ghost Coast to Coast.
Right.
this seems interesting, and I'm wondering if they're going to fold Future Quest into the DC universe proper, and I just assume they will.
Yeah, that'll be interesting to see. So they announced they struck a deal, I think, or something like that for these Hanna-Barbera titles, and it will be interesting to see how they potentially cross over the universes and stuff like that. But yeah. I mean, Derek, you and I are literary guys. I'm a Berkeley English guy. I love your work on Philip Roth, but when it comes to Future Quest, I'm in. I'm so in. I mean, first of all, the team, Parker and Shaner, are incredible. I mentioned before Somni and Tanchi Zanjic. I think this similar aesthetic, just so good. Doc Shaner's art is so good. But the team's done, Flash Gordon, and they did that one Convergence with Shazam. And these characters, I'm going to get a bowl of cereal right now. Just looking at this picture,
Sugary cereal.
Sugary cereal.
Captain Crunch.
Nothing you should ever feed your kids, and nothing I should have eaten as a kid. And I'm just gonna, I'm in. I'm totally in.
Yeah. Let's see. That is the one, the Future Quest, that I'm more interested in. Definitely more so than the Scooby-Doo Apocalypse or the Scooby Apocalypse. Yeah. Now, on the topic of Hanna-Barbera, I'm waiting for DC to do something in terms of new titles with H.R. Pufnstuf,
right,
with Lidsville, with not with the Bugaloos. I was about to say the Bugaloos because there's something about the Bugaloos and Martha Ray's character that always freaked me out as a kid.
I think it'll be interesting. That I thought. The part that made me laugh out loud with Scooby, and not to discount it, if you're into it, that's cool. But was the story by Jim Lee? I'm just picturing the Ethan Van Sciver. A bug, the DC creative teams that are going to be on these books. It'll be interesting to watch.
Yeah. I think I do have one other thing in the DC section proper. Do you have anything?
Nope.
Before we get to Vertigo? Okay, and this is on page 133, and I almost forgot about this, especially in light of your mentioning of Prez. But here we have on page 133 a trade paperback, Prez, the First Teenage President. Now, this is not the Prez that just recently wrapped up, and it wasn't around for very long.
Right.
This is the original Prez, written by Joe Simon, and this is a big deal here. I remember as a kid, because I'm older than you. Not that I'm proud of that fact. I'm just pointing that out, or saying,
right.
That gives me like a.
Not at all.
I'm just saying. I remember when this came out on the spinner rack, and yes, I used to get my comics at a 7-Eleven right down the street.
Yeah.
That had a spinner rack,
and
I remember specifically seeing Prez, and I think I probably bought issue number 1 of Prez. I don't know for certain because, like an idiot, I got rid of my comics for a few bucks after I finished undergraduate school, and I've never stopped hating myself since.
Yeah, we've all been there.
Yeah, but this would be good. So if you really liked the current Prez miniseries, then you may want to check out this trade, Prez, the First Teenage President, that collects the original. It's on page 133 of the catalog.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, if there's other scholars out there, I'm still waiting to read the study on Prez. If you look at the bottom of the solicit, unexpected appearances from the Sandman, pages from Batman The Dark Knight Strikes Again. I was like, wow, I had no idea, So
yeah,
there's something interesting to be written about Prez and the DC universe.
That's right. These are gems out there, folks. These are gems that Paul's throwing you. These are ideas that you should pick up on.
The call for papers. Paul's random ideas going through previews.
Do you have anything in Vertigo?
Nothing that's new. By the way, if folks haven't heard your Vertigo Publisher Spotlight episode, that was a really nice walkthrough of the new titles.
Thanks.
Yeah, I'm all aboard for Sheriff of Babylon and Unfollow, so I'm just going to keep going with those.
Yeah, because over the past couple of months, at least in previews, we have solicits for the trades that are starting to come out.
Yes.
So I don't want to highlight any of those, even though I think they're worth getting. But one thing I will mention in the Vertigo section, and this is on page 140, is Flinch Book 2 trade paperback.
Oh, yeah.
A couple of months ago, I don't think it was last month, I think it was 2 months ago, we had the solicit for the first volume of Flinch. And this is an older Vertigo series, and we mentioned at the time that it's something that if you missed out on originally, you should definitely check out. So now we have this second book.
Yeah, I haven't been reading that.
Yeah.
So.
And I can't remember the original pub date on Flinch, but years ago.
Yeah.
Back in, I think, the early 2000s. I should have checked that out. But.
Yeah. Yeah, I have quite a list of writers and artists there. The creators are amazing.
Okay, do you want to head on over to the IDW section?
Sure, let's go.
Okay, where do you begin?
I'm on page 186.
Okay, because I have something before that.
Okay, not My Little Pony, I'm guessing.
Darn it, you guessed it. Actually, no, this is probably the antithetical My Little Pony. Okay. This is on page 167, and this is Archangel, written by William Gibson.
Oh, look at that. I missed this.
Yes.
Yeah.
The big-time cyberpunk writer.
Right.
And, most notable, I guess, for Neuromancer, even though he's written a number of other things. Yeah. But Neuromancer is what I really know him for. I've even used Neuromancer whenever I've taught sci-fi fiction courses. But this is something that, so this is art by Butch. Is it Guice? I'm not sure. It's Guice. I'm not sure how you pronounce the name.
Yeah, I've heard somebody say Geis, but that way it wasn't him himself. So I don't know if that's how you said. Yeah.
But I guess it looks interesting. I mean, the solicit is the U.S. political leaders of 2016 abandon the radioactive planet they've destroyed and harness President Trump and harness the power of humanity's last hope. The Splitter, a colossal machine designed to manufacture bright new reality for them to infiltrate and corrupt. So it seems interesting, but what really brings me to this is kind of like the Gene Ha phenomena that I mentioned earlier, is the name here, and that's William Gibson. So apparently I think this is his first foray into comics from what I understand.
Oh, I didn't know that. Yeah, that'd be interesting.
But, and where did I get that this is his first foray into comics? Did I see it somewhere? Oh, it says, he makes his comic book debut with this all-new original story. So that's Archangel by William Gibson. You can find it on page 167 in the IDW section.
Yeah, I think the more novelists who get into comics, the more that as an area of an area to watch, it just becomes fascinating. I mean, folks who write genre stuff and just literary fiction and stuff. So yeah, that'll be interesting.
Yeah. And I actually have, I guess, one or two other things before we get to, what did you say, page 180?
I'm at 186, but let's go. Yeah, let's go.
Okay.
Where are you going?
Yeah, before we get there, on pages both 176 and 177, on 176 is Hero Comics, a Hero Initiative benefit book, and that subtitle basically says it all.
Yeah.
And this, I'm assuming, collects some of the previous single issues of Hero Comics. And so you got some good stories by some good creators, among others, Kurt Busiek, Howard Chaykin, Neil Gaiman, Bill Willingham, Gene Ha, Sam Keith, Ashley Wood, Dave Sim. It goes on and on. Yeah. So it's something definitely worth checking out. And this is, it's a trade paperback. At first I thought it was hardcover.
Right.
But then on the facing page is, I think, even more interesting. And this is yet another comics adaptation of Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. The official title to this, I guess, is Hunter S. Thompson's Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. And this is the first issue. And it's written by Troy Little and with art by Troy Little. So, now wait a minute. I'm trying to think. Wasn't Troy Little the one who adapted the Top Shelf Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas that came out several months ago?
Yeah, I know that there was that adaptation, and I'm trying to find out right now if he was. He is. It looks like he is.
Well, what the hell is this then? Okay, this is IDW. Now, we know that Top Shelf is now owned by IDW, and this is an IDW series, and this is issue number 1. We don't know how many issues there are going to be.
I see. It says in the second paragraph of the solicit, this comic version is presented in black and white and at a slightly larger size than the full cover hardcover.
Oh, I see. Okay,
so it sounds like they're reprinting it in issues, which is an interesting strategy. It's like kind of backwards, right?
Okay, now I'm embarrassed because I could have easily read that second paragraph.
No, it's not a problem.
But now I didn't. And I think it was the cover art that threw me, because this is definitely not what we saw in that top shelf.
Yep.
And I wonder why they're doing that.
Yeah, I don't know, but I think of Hip Hop Family Tree. You know how they went from Fantagraphics went from publishing those huge volumes, which are beautiful, to deciding to go for the single issue things afterwards. I think it's an interesting strategy. I'm not sure.
Yeah, but this is a little different in that with Hip Hop Family Tree, it's conceivable that at some point the single issues that are coming out monthly will at some point surpass where he is with the collected editions.
Right, that makes sense, yeah.
And so that's ongoing.
Right.
Now, Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas is a finite narrative, comics and otherwise. And so we know since this is a black and white series based on, or I guess a black and white version of the original graphic novel that was in color, they only have so many issues that they can come up with.
Right.
So it just seems a strange move.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering the logic behind this.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I don't know. But, okay, so I'm not going to get it now, but that's definitely worth mentioning because it's interesting. And if you turn the page, on page 178, we have yet another collection, Atomic Robo, and this is the most recent story arc, Atomic Robo and the Ring of Fire. Now remember, last year, Kanka and I had Brian Clevenger on the show.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And he was a lot of fun to talk with.
Yes.
And I love Atomic Robo. I don't know anyone who's read Atomic Robo who doesn't like it.
How can you not?
How could you not? And I'm sure that there are those people out there who do not, but they're probably Donald Trump supporters. That's my second dig within the first, 40 minutes of this show, maybe 30 minutes, at Donald Trump.
It's how can you not talk about it,
Yeah.
It's everywhere. And apologies if we alienate any of the constituency, but I'm not too worried.
Apologies.
No apologies. No apologies.
I'm not
whatsoever.
okay. This is Derek Rant Part 2, right? I talked about Marvel. Now I'm going to talk about Trump. I'm not so much disappointed in Trump because I know what to expect with that loser.
It's the support.
It's the supporters and the media that give him free coverage, but it's the supporters. It's the people who back him. And, there's a reason that Mussolini came to power. And it wasn't just his own machinations. There are reasons why other leaders that are rather, let's say, nationalistic, or dare I say fascistic, that they come to power, and it's not just because of their machinations.
Right.
They have to have the people that are behind them.
Yeah. So
I point my fingers more at Trump supporters than I do Trump himself. But I'll stop because I don't want to go too far here.
Well, history's going to judge us about whether we've said anything. So
yes.
I'm behind you, Derek.
Good. We're on record now.
That's right. I'm with you.
Okay, so now on to something a little more pleasant. Comics.
Yeah. Pleasant? Maybe. Did you have something else?
Before you get to, 186?
Yeah, I'm going to take us to Weird Love. I joined a teenage sex club. So I don't know if you...
That is much more interesting.
Yeah. But should we go there?
Sure.
So this is Yo Books, friend of the show, Craig Yo. And I have read some of these. Actually, my local library, my local public library is just phenomenal, has a phenomenal comic section. And so they've actually carried some of these books. And it's just... I don't know. Again, if you, whether it's nostalgia or sort of fascination with, cultural artifacts, it's just you got to look at these. So I'll probably check this out in some form or another.
Oh, I definitely will check it out. I mean, to me, and you're right in mentioning that Craig is a friend of the show. Everything he does, I think, is definitely worth checking out because, I mean, whether it's offbeat or not, and of course most of it is offbeat. But I think the care that he and his wife Klizia put into Yo Books is just phenomenal. And even though you may not be a fan of the content of the material that they're collecting, you absolutely have to love their books just for the packaging, the nice hardcover, sometimes the embossed covers, and they do some really interesting things with just the overall packaging of their books.
Yeah.
And this, they do this with Weird Love and also their other bi-monthly series, Haunted Horror. So, yeah, definitely check out. This is, I think, the third volume of Weird Love collected. Weird Love, I Joined a Teenage Sex Cult.
Yeah. I don't have any personal experience with that, that phenomenon of teenage sex cults. So it'll be interesting.
Yeah, and you're on record for that now.
Oh, right, yes. It's public now. But actually, I do want to take us somewhere. We usually cover the first volumes of things, but can I talk Dick Tracy?
Of course.
This is your childhood dream to talk about Dick Tracy when you're a grown adult on a podcast. But Dick Tracy, IDW's been collecting these in interesting, I think maybe 7 or 8 volumes in. They shifted the print size. So I got a bookshelf where I got a row of the short ones, and then now they got these huge ones. Anyway, I've been a Dick Tracy fan pretty much since I was a kid. Just kind of the whole detective and crime and noir world, as Andy Wolverton knows really well, has been kind of a fascination for me. So Dick Tracy, I've been an avid reader, and as a kid, I would hunt down any collections that I could find. And then again, as an adult, when Amazon made the world of books available, I would just hunt, rebuy all those old things that, like you said, I sold when I became an undergraduate. So I've seen the whole run, the 30s when it started. If you've ever been a newspaper comic strip collection reader, just I think the place that Chester Gould and Dick Tracy has had in the sort of comics legacy, it can't be ignored. But I think this collection, this volume 20, it collects 1961 to 62. So, Derek, have you read Dick Tracy?
Bits and pieces here or there, not near as consistent as you.
Yeah, and it's got eras, right? So this run that lasts, at least for under Chester Gould for half of a century, has got these distinctive eras. And in the 60s, everybody kind of associates that time period with Dick Tracy and these city cops going to the moon. It's definitely a space age era. And then the 50s, I think, have their own landmark stories. This is a gap that this volume collects. And maybe for good reason that they haven't been collected. I think this is thought of often by historians as kind of a low ebb in the series. But I've never read, as it says in this cover, the trusty detective trails Brush Spready, who is a grotesque who seems to have a face that consists of a brush. So if you are a fan like me, and just to point that out. But if you haven't read any of these Dick Tracy books, I recommend folks go out and check it out. I mean, if you have any interest in detective or crime comics, and I think it's an important, like I said, an important legacy.
Right. We were talking a moment ago about Craig Yo and the care that he puts into his books.
Yeah.
Yo Books is published through IDW, but another series, and this is where the Dick Tracy volume comes into play, that IDW has is the Library of American Comics.
Yeah.
And that is edited by Dean Mullaney.
Yeah.
We were lucky enough to have Dean Mullaney on the podcast last year, and Kunk and I had a great conversation with him.
Right.
You can't say enough good things about the Library of American Comics, and this is just another reason to like this series.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for indulging my Dick Tracy digression.
Sure. Well, you indulged my Trump rant.
This is right.
And my Marvel rant.
Part of the fun.
Okay, so what I'm about to say next is rant-free. If you turn the page, this is in the top shelf section of the IDW part of the catalog. On page 189, Cigarette Girl.
Yep.
Masahiko Matsumoto. And this is interesting in that I don't remember Top Shelf putting out a work of manga, either classic manga or newer manga at all. And maybe they have, but I'm just not aware of this. But this is from, I guess you could call him, what some may call him, alternative manga writer. And the timing on this, of seeing this in the catalog, couldn't be better for me in that in the February, even though it's going to be late and come out early March, but in the February episode of the manga series, Shay and I are discussing Yoshihiro Tatsumi's A Drifting Life, which is his autobiographical work.
Yeah.
And Matsumoto plays a major part in A Drifting Life. And so as I was going back and looking through again to prepare for that recording, A Drifting Life, it was about the time that I got my March catalog, and then I saw that Cigarette Girl is now going to be published by Top Shelf. So I got really excited.
Yeah. That's brilliant timing. But yeah, Matsumoto is, as it says here, one of the leading lights of the Japanese alternative comics movement known as Gegika. Gegika, that's right. And this volume features an introduction.
By Tatsumi.
Exactly. Yeah. So, yeah, I'm going to be interested. I mean, I've read a lot of Tatsumi, but not this. So,
yeah, and he died last year. So,
yeah.
This is sad passing.
Sad passing for sure.
Yeah. We've lost a number of legendary manga creators over the past year.
Yeah.
Now you go next to 190, correct?
I do.
And this is part of another series that IDW has, and that is their Eurocomic series.
Yeah. They've done the Hugo Pratt books and things like that. Yeah. This is The Adventures of Dieter Lumpen, which is, I think, a European classic, similar to Corto Maltese, and written by Jorge Zentner and art by Ruben Pelejero. Do you want to talk about this at all?
I had marked this as one that I wanted to discuss.
Oh, sorry.
Read or discuss. No. I mean, I knew that you wanted to bring this up, so
sure.
I was letting you go to it.
Sure. No, we're on the same page though. But what is it about this work that catches your eye?
Well, the art, and also the fact that it's part of the Euro comic series. Now, I have to tell you, I remember seeing references to this in the past, but only in passing. So I don't know anything about this title other than the solicit that we see here.
Yeah, me neither. And has this been reprinted in English before?
I don't know. That's something I guess maybe we could have looked up.
Should have done my research, but regardless, I think
says the professors. Yeah,
right. But this does collect the whole series, and that's intriguing to me. I'm going to be in for this one.
It's interesting in that there are some months that the IDW section I may have one, if that. Title that's coming out that I'm interested in, but this time around, man, there's a lot in IDW.
Yeah, when I saw where IDW ranks in the sort of market share, I was really surprised, and then I realized I shouldn't be because they cover so many bases. I mean, between Top Shelf and the licensed work, you shouldn't be surprised. They have quite an output.
Yeah, they do good ongoing series or even limited series. But for me, what makes IDW stand out is their collections, their hardbound and their trades. That's things like the Euro Comic series, Library of American Comics, Yo Books, Top Shelf, things of that sort.
Yeah, that's right. I agree with you. Although having said that, have to give a shout out to some of that Transformers stuff. Okay. I think they're doing some socially subversive things. It's interesting.
I never got into Transformers.
Maybe I'll send you a book one day. Let's give it a shot.
So if we're done with the IDW section, you want to move on to Image.
Let's do it.
Now, we can always count on Image for quite a number of new number ones. They're doing this all the time. But before we get to those, let's do something that we did with DC. Before we got into the DC titles, DC Vertigo titles, we mentioned some recent news concerning DC. And there's some recent news concerning Image and previews.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
And I'm curious about your take on this. I don't know what to expect. Honestly, I have to tell you, I feel mixed. And for those who may not know, it was announced, I think it was last week, wasn't it? Or maybe a week and a half ago, that Image, and I can't remember when they're going to start doing this, but they're going to be providing a supplement to previews, kind of like what Marvel, my favorite publisher, does. And they're going to have a separate section that's going to, I guess, come in every previews catalog, although I guess you can buy it separately as well.
Yeah.
And the thing to me that's most exciting about this is that, at least for the first several issues, for several months of the supplement, they're going to be running an original Walking Dead serial in those supplements. And I think that that's great. Other than that, though, I'm wondering, is this going to be a good thing? Now, it may make good business sense for Image, and so I don't begrudge them that.
Yeah.
However, if this is an indication of things that may come later, so we've had for a number of years Marvel doing the arrogant thing that it does, its own supplement, and I do want to underscore the word arrogant. Okay, but I'm not going to rant. I promise.
The rant continues. It's all right.
Yeah. And now we have Image doing this. Now, if this becomes successful, a big business move, a good business move for Image, then what's to stop other publishers like DC and maybe others from doing the same? Now, does this also mean that Image is going to take out almost everything from the regular catalog? I would guess they would. I don't know. And just have everything in the supplement. Because if it gets to the point that 2, 3, or more publishers are doing their own catalogs, their supplements, that's still distributed by Diamond, but it's not a part of the main catalog, then what's going to become of the main catalog? And I don't want to look too far into the future on this. I'm just thinking that if this becomes a really good and successful business move for Image, then hey, more power to them. I love Image. They deserve to do as well and even better than they're doing now. But why take it out of the catalog proper? Why make a Marvel-esque move? So we have DC doing this, this new weird relaunch, the same shenanigans that Marvel's doing, and now we have Image that, with their supplemental to the previews catalog, doing something that Marvel's doing.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, I think as you're saying, it's something to watch because, I actually recently got to have a sort of a conversation with David Brothers, who's their branding manager, and then Eric Stevenson made I think it was a keynote at the Comics Bro sort of retailers convention, and to me, it's all part and parcel. And what you're describing, sort of this upcoming Image previews, it's sort of an artifact of Image really trying to carve out their own place in the market, or in some sense trying to grow into the unique role that they have in the market. And so, if I could put on my nerd glasses, as I like to say a little bit, I think it's fascinating how, who buys Image books, and when you go into a shop, the way that they market themselves, the emphasis on creator ownership and how they are, not really trying to sell a shared universe the way that the big two have. They're really trying to do something different, somewhere in between mainstream comics and independent comics, but sort of on a big market scale. And we kind of see endeavors like this all the time. You guys mentioned a few months ago, I think, the way that they reorganized their pages within previews. They've got their own color. It's like the black section. There's the green, the blue.
Right, but then they tempered that because it was a little too confusing.
Yeah. But you can see, and even things like they did Image Direct. I don't know how well that's gone, but it's sort of like buying from them and circumventing the direct market through shops. They just do interesting things, and I think they're trying to, in a sense, carve out a distinctive place that matches what they think they're doing. They sort of brand themselves as revolutionary. I think you can be skeptical about that. But to me, that this move is, in keeping with all those kinds of sort of self-branding efforts, and it feels of a piece with them saying, we're about independence. We're about creators doing their thing and not being locked in necessarily to the market constraints that everybody else feels locked into. So.
Yeah, and that's a good point. So, earlier I said that one of the big pluses for this new move of theirs, doing their own supplement to the Previews catalog, is this original comic, right? I mean, because I think that if you're going to do something like this, unlike Marvel, then give something original. And from what I understand, years ago, you used to find original content of some form or another, I mean, besides just solicits, in Previews. So this is good. I like that. But in addition to that, one of the things that makes, from what we understand, from what we know so far, this new supplement from Image different from what Marvel's doing is the intentions behind it, right? That they are, a major publisher, but they're not playing the same game that DC and Marvel are both playing. And for that reason, we need to support and applaud them in any way we can. So maybe I should be more supportive of this new supplement move.
I think they aren't playing the same game, but they, sometimes they are. So we'll see. Yeah. They have a lot of goodwill, I think. They have a lot of trust from buyers like us.
Yeah, and I think, one of the reasons why they get that goodwill is because they put out good comics. And on page 194, and then we have sample art on pages 195, 196, and 197,
yes,
is Kerry Kyle Andrews' Renato Jones, The 1%. And this looks interesting, and I like the art samples that I see on these 3 pages.
Yeah. He's an interesting artist. He's one of these guys who has done work at the Big Two. He did an Iron Fist series, but he does everything. It's a story, art, and cover. But I think outside of lettering here, he's one of these people who writes, draws, and I think I got to talk to him at Image Expo in July when he announced this book. A little bit afterwards, actually, and I think he feels like the whole creator-owned idea is really attractive to him because he told a story there, so it's public, but he told a story there at Image Expo about, not wanting to bite the hand that feeds him, appreciating Marvel and how well they treated him. But at the end of the day, he was, sort of one lone figure pouring his blood and guts and heart into this book, writing, drawing, doing the whole thing. And then sort of walking up to meet them and I'm telling the story wrong, but they basically gave him a handshake and a thank you very much for servicing our character, and I think he just felt a sense of what it is to work for this giant corporation, and that was not unrelated. He's told that story, and then he said, and so my next book, The 1%, and I think the whole crowd kind of caught, what he was gesturing towards, So this is definitely, I think it's an anti-capitalism run amok hero, is the idea, sort of a Robin Hood type hero. So yeah, I'll be interested to see it too.
Yeah, and I think one of the only other new number ones that we have, or one of the only other number ones, unless I'm missing something, and this is on page 198, 3 Floyd's Alpha King, and this is written by Nick Floyd and Brian Azzarello with art by Seamus Billsley and Ryan Brown. So, that caught my attention right there, Ryan Brown, but also Azzarello.
Yeah.
This is one of 5, and I tell you, one of the things that sticks out to me is the fact that in Image, you do see in a solicit the number of issues that this limited series will be, or the fact that they even indicate that it's a limited series. Because often with Image, they don't tell you if something is planned on being an ongoing
Right.
or if it's limited, and I can understand the reasoning behind that. I mean, I'd like it, but I can understand the business reasoning for the creators. But here we have Floyd Azzarello and company saying, hey, this is only going to be 5 issues, guys.
Right. I appreciate that integrity.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not going to get this book, but I know somebody heard Simon Bisley and Ryan Brown and probably Floyd and Azzarello, and they're all in. So God bless you, is what I say. Bisley, he's I think a 2000 AD, and he's done Lobo, but he's got a following for sure. Not my cup of tea exactly, but people are going to go for this.
I agree with you on Bisley's style. And I'm looking at the sample art here, and I'm wondering where Ryan Brown comes in. Is he the colorist, or is he helping with the art in other ways?
That's a great question. That's interesting to me. I look at this art and
because I don't see Ryan Brown at all.
Yeah.
There's nothing Ryan Brownish
about
in the art that comes out.
Yeah. I mean, I think those faces speak a little more Ryan Brown than Simon Bisley to me, but I could be wrong.
Okay.
I don't know.
Maybe.
I don't know.
There's not enough wackiness.
Not enough, right? Not enough randomness, or fart jokes and stuff.
And outside of a couple of trades, I think that's all I have in Image, because I don't have anything that I've marked to discuss until we get to page 235.
Okay. Yeah, let's go there. I'm with you.
Okay, I didn't know if you had anything before that. And, I don't often mention trades that are collections of either entire miniseries or arcs within an ongoing in Image, although a couple this time around I want to highlight. And the one on page 235 is Jeff Lemire and Emmy Lennox's Plutona.
Yes.
And this collects the entire series, issues 1 through 5. Now, Plutona was one of those when it was first solicited, maybe with the first 2 issues. I don't think there was any indication that this was going to be limited to just 5 issues. But it could have been that there was no intention of limiting this. They just wanted to test the waters. If it sold, maybe it would be ongoing or at least longer than 5.
Yeah.
But if it didn't, they always had the option of cutting it off at one narrative arc. For whatever reason.
Yeah.
I like this first issue of Plutona. I don't think I read past issue number 1, and I didn't consciously trade weight, but this may be an inadvertent trade weight for me.
I hope that sort of, it not saying volume 1 doesn't mean that sales were poor, because I'm a huge Jeff Lemire fan. I liked Emmytown, Emmy Lennox's work, and Jordi Belair. I mean, come on, this team is irresistible, and the book is good. I've read the first, I think it's 4 issues have been out. Yeah, it's good. It's good. It's fascinating read. So, but yeah, I recommend it too.
Yeah. And the only other things I have in the Image section is if you turn the page on page 236, and both of these are reprints. On 236, you have Farrell Dalrymple's Pop Gun War.
Yeah.
And then this one has a subtitle, Gift. And I want to get to that in a moment.
Okay.
But then on the facing page is another reprint, and this is on 237, Garth Ennis and John Higgins's Pride and Joy. Now, Pride and Joy I didn't read originally, but this was, I believe, a Vertigo book, wasn't it?
I don't remember, actually. I've never read this. Yeah.
From years back.
Right.
So this is worth looking at, especially if you're a fan of Garth Ennis, and I am. If you're not a fan of Garth Ennis, if there's something about him that kind of turns your stomach, which I can see, especially if violence and explicitness of various sorts is not your cup of tea.
Yeah, it's fairly extreme.
Then, right. But I like him.
Yeah.
I like his work. So it's definitely worth getting if you didn't get the original. But the thing that I'm a little more interested in is, again, that earlier solicit, and this is Dalrymple's Pop Gun War. And the title here, this is a trade paperback. It says Pop Gun War Gift. Now, from the solicit, from what I guess is the cover image, this looks to be like a reprint of Dalrymple's Pop Gun War.
Yeah, I believe so.
And I think it was Dark Horse that originally collected that. Now, I read that collection. It's been a long time. But when I was going back on mycomicshop.com and just looking at the previous incarnation of Pop Gun War, with the collections, I did not see the subtitle Gift.
Right.
So I'm wondering what's going on here.
Yeah, I am too, and I'm really interested in this. I loved Wrenchies, Farrell Dalrymple's book. I think that was the second book a couple of years ago. And then more recently, he had a shorter one, Pale Fire, that I liked. I never read Pop Gun War. I know that in earlier editions, this sort of a different image, but the same sort of character on the cover. Right. You know, I think it looks like maybe an African American man with angel's wings.
Yes,
was on. Yeah. So, but yeah, I don't. I don't know if this is. I mean, this is a offer to get. This is a reprint, right?
It could be new? Now, but it's that subtitle Gift that confounds me, because if this is indeed an entirely new Pop Gun War, which I don't think it is, but who knows? If it is, then maybe it's bringing things back. But it just looks a lot like the original Dark Horse Pop Gun War, and I'm just wondering, is giving it a subtitle this time around a slight tweak on the repackaging? I don't know. And there's nothing in the solicit that tells us that this is new material or reprint material.
Yeah, and I'm not finding anything in my sort of brief glance online about that. But either way, I didn't get to see it the first time, so I'm probably gonna see it this time.
Yeah. And that's all I have in Image. Do you have anything else in that section?
I mean, just briefly that, second volume of No Mercy. That's a series I've been enjoying, and just the usual. Yeah, Image. You got my wallet.
Yeah.
So. Yeah.
I think that if I isolated the publishers Image, Fantagraphics, and Drawn and Quarterly, that would take the majority of what I should, at least, not that I do this or not, but what I should allot monthly for comics buying.
Right. There's my daughter's college savings fund.
Yeah, right there. And it's not entirely my fault.
No, I don't blame you. I don't actually blame you.
So now we get in the back half of the catalog when we get past the premier publishers. And where do you have your first eyeballing incident?
First page, 254. Are you
okay?
Are you there too?
Well, I knew you were going to be there, so I'll let you.
So I come here because it's the last issue of Rachel Rising, which is Terry Moore's series that he's been sort of publishing through what he calls Abstract Studios. I think it's basically Terry Moore's work.
Terry and his wife.
Yeah, sorry.
It's basically Abstract Studios. Yeah.
Shouldn't leave her out for sure. But have you read Rachel Rising?
Oh, yeah. Now, I'm really behind. I have been keeping up with it adamantly.
Yeah.
And in fact, when it began in 2012, it was one of my top 10 titles of that year. And that's when we first started doing the podcast.
Yeah.
So I've loved this. I've gotten behind recently.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of saddened when we heard the news not too long ago that Rachel Rising would be ending with issue number 42. I wasn't completely surprised.
Yeah.
And I don't know if he's ending this because of sales or if he just felt that he was coming to a natural endpoint.
Right.
Or maybe a combination of the two. Who knows?
Right.
But this is, I think, an outstanding series, whether you are a fan of horror and the macabre or not.
Yeah.
It's, incredible art. Of course, it's Terry Moore, and I think it's great storytelling. And I'm glad that this is coming to a conclusion, but at the same time, it saddens me.
Yeah. I think for storytelling reasons, I'm glad it's coming to a conclusion. Sometimes The Walking Dead feels like a Walking Dead, But and so it's such a good narrative and totally captivating. And actually, like you were saying, the sort of horror macabre is not usually. I'm usually kind of averse to that stuff. I started reading because of Terry Moore, because Strangers in Paradise, I think, was such an important work. And so, like you, I couldn't put it down. It's so good. And I stopped at one point realizing, I think when I knew it was going to come to an end, because I realized I wanted to reread it, sort of start to finish. And I guess there's going to be a finish. And I agree. That's sad, but I hope it is a good thing for the Moores that they're, moving on to good things too. But
oh yeah.
Yeah.
Now, Rachel Rising is one of the few titles right now that, even if I'm not keeping up with it as diligently as I should, I'm still getting every single one of the single issues. I haven't gotten the trades, and one of the reasons why I continue to get the series but not the trades is I continue to get the series just because this is something that I absolutely love and I'm a completist.
Right.
And I didn't think this would go on forever. So, it stops at 42. Okay, that's fine. I didn't get the trades because I want a larger omnibus volume of this that I'm sure he's going to put out.
Yes. Yeah.
Like he did with Strangers in Paradise. And maybe even a better example is Echo.
Yeah.
And I can't remember how many issues Echo was. That was 20-some, wasn't it?
30.
Oh, it was 30? Okay.
30 issues.
Because that was really good as well.
Right.
Although I do have to say I like Rachel Rising. I mean, I love Echo, but I like Rachel Rising better.
Yeah, me too.
And this is a bit of breaking news, at least to our listeners. And unless there is some complication, we will be interviewing Terry Moore around the publication of issue number 42.
Oh, that's awesome. That's great news.
I got in touch with him a few weeks ago because if you remember on the blog, I interviewed him, a really long interview, not long after Rachel Rising started. And that was a very satisfying interview. I even had a brief interview with him at the Dallas Con about 2.5 years ago. So it's not as if he hasn't been a part of the Comics Alternative before. But because this important title is ending, I definitely wanted to get him on for a long podcast interview. And he said, sure.
Yeah, hopefully he'll, divulge a little about their plans and some of the history. But I will be really fascinated to hear that. Yep. Cool. Move on.
Now, if you turn the page, 256.
Yes.
You're probably where I am as well, and this is Ad House. You can always count on great things with Ad House.
Yeah, for sure.
Chris Pizer does a great job there. And, we had Andy Wolverton and I had a very fun publisher spotlight last year on Ad House Books. And this is one of their new titles. This is Talk Dirty to Me. And I'm choosing this not because of the title, although the title, is intriguing enough as it is. And this is by Luke Howard. Growing up, it felt like she was meant to be ashamed of her sexuality. Girls weren't supposed to want those things, right? With grand visions of sexual empowerment, Emma decides to try being an operator for a sex hotline. But there's a gaping wound between those visions and reality. So, that's a short, sweet, in and out, so to speak, no pun intended, solicit for Talk Dirty to Me.
Yeah. It looks interesting. Yeah.
Now, are you familiar with the work of Luke Howard?
I'm not.
I'm not either. But the name rang a bell, and I thought, if I read something about him in the past and forgot, I should become aware of this. And so I looked him up. I don't think I've read him before, but I do recognize that name.
Huh. And you didn't find anything that...
a reason that I would recognize it? No, but I'm sure that I've heard it or read it somewhere.
Yeah.
But this is something that I'm definitely wanting to check out and maybe even discuss on a future episode.
Yeah, Ad House books are consistently worth talking about. Yeah.
Where do you go?
I am not until study group at 270. So I don't know if you have anything in between there.
Yeah. In fact, that's where I go next.
Okay.
Is the group of listings under Alternative Comics.
Yeah.
And, we know that last year, it's been almost exactly a year now that Alternative Comics struck an agreement with a variety of other smaller publishers like Study Group, like Hick and Hawk, like Floating World, and several others, Hang Die Editions. And so they are, still published under those brands like Study Group and Hick and Hawk, but they're distributed through Alternative, and they're all listed in previews under Alternative. And we have, as we have been over the past several months since they announced this, quite a number of solicits under Alternative. Now, you mentioned Study Group magazine. Is that what you wanted to highlight?
Yeah. I mean, let me just read these names and try not to be overwhelmed. We have Farrell Dalrymple, we have Ed Whelan, we have Lark Pian, we have Noah Van Sciver, Adria Kalfas. I'm not familiar with that creator. Benjamin Mara, Dylan Horrocks. Study Group just sort of, each edition just kind of overwhelms with the talent. And like I said, I'm a fan of anthologies. What they put together is just phenomenal. So if listeners aren't familiar, I definitely recommend you check them out online and see the stuff they're coming out with. But as you said, the entire alternative comics sort of cadre is all fantastic work.
Exactly. Now let me ask you. Now you've read earlier issues of Study Group magazine, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
See, I have not. I've read other things from Study Group, both online and in print, but I've not read an issue of their magazine. So this is something that, one, I'm ashamed that I haven't read earlier, but two, I'm looking forward to seeing this issue number 4.
Yeah, and for this, if I can give a shout out to my LCS. There's a comic shop in Berkeley, a couple of comic shops in Berkeley that I frequent, but they were really, really good about just hearing what I was interested in, turning me on to stuff like this. So, kind of jumping on early. So, yeah, it's good. It's good stuff.
Mm-hmm. But the other things that they have listed here looks interesting as well. So, for instance, at the top of the page there is issue number 3 of Titan. And Wolverton and I discussed Titan on one of our last year's webcomics episodes. It's by Francois Vignol.
Yeah.
And in fact, I met Francois at SPX last year.
Yeah.
And he remembered us reviewing his webcomic version of Titan.
Yep.
And so he was very appreciative of that. I'm also interested in Tyler Landry's Vile #1.
Yes.
It says a double-sized debut issue of this ongoing one-man anthology. It features the graphic novella The Coward's Hole. In the wake of vast space battle, one soldier's spacecraft crash lands on a barren planet light years from the Alliance. But is he truly alone? A terrifying tale of survival and madness. And this is another Study Group production. And then the one right next to this, Why Would You Do That? Andrea Tsurumi, and I'm not familiar with Andrea Tsurumi, but this is another collection of stories from a single creator. And one of the things that looks intriguing on the cover is you have 2 ice cream cones fighting.
And then right above it, the words, "Why would you do that?" So apropos.
Because,
come on.
Of course, you see that cover, and then the first question you would ask is, why would you do that?
Yeah. Now, do you know if alternative comics, not to advertise ways of bypassing the comic shop, but do you know if they sell directly?
Well, I'm sure. Well, I was about to say I'm sure that you could.
Yeah.
I don't know for a fact that that's the case.
Okay. Because I know Titan, for instance, I think the 4th issue is online right now.
Right.
For readers, it's definitely not safe for work, but
yeah.
it's where the narrative goes. It's good. But
I know with Study Group, because Titan is one of the titles out of Study Group.
Yep.
On their website, you can find the webcomic versions
Yeah.
of their titles, and then whenever a creator is ready for the next issue of a hard copy version, then you can get it through their website. I don't think Alternative itself does this, and I'm not sure if the other publishers under now this consortium umbrella do the same thing as well.
Yeah, it seems like they allow sort of whatever independence that the publishers want to exercise. So
Yeah.
I think it's just different.
Yeah, and we also have we talked about Floating World. There are 2 Floating World solicits under the Alternative Comics banner. One is Carlos Gonzalez's Scab Country, and I'm not familiar with Gonzalez's work. And then the other is Video Tonfa by Tim Goodyear. And I'm not familiar with his work either.
Yeah, me neither.
But there's a scene from The Shining.
Yeah.
Cover.
That's The Shining. That's right. I had Cuckoo's Nest for a moment, but you're right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I leave it to Alternative to publish something that if I were to look at the cover sort of by itself, I would pass over. But since it's under this umbrella, I have to pay attention to it. So I will. Yeah, I'll consider those for sure.
Okay, so after Alternative Comics, Now, I have something in Avatar. Do you have anything before Avatar?
I don't. No, in fact, I don't have anything until Boom. So
okay.
We'll take
actually, I have two things in Avatar,
Okay.
and it's not often that
Yeah.
either I or Kunkka or whoever's doing the preview spotlight with me has anything
Right.
in Avatar. Once in a while, perhaps.
Right.
But a couple things in this month's Avatar section are definitely worth mentioning. One, on page 290, is the first collection of Alan Moore and Jason Burrows' Providence. And
Yeah.
Now, I'm loving Providence, and in fact, it was one of my top 10 titles of 2015.
Yeah.
And now they are coming out with the first hardcover collection. So I'm guessing they're going to do 2 hardcover collections of this 12 issue, ultimately a 12. Well, I don't know, maybe 3 now, because this collects issues 1 through 4. So what Moore and Burrows, I guess, they're going to be doing is coming out with 3 separate collections. And then I would assume later on a complete, if we want to call it omnibus or deluxe edition of Providence. I'm not entirely pleased with that strategy. It is a way for them to make money and to double dip. The individual issues, the collections, only 4 issues, not much of a collection.
Right.
And then what is sure to be an ultimate omnibus edition. But it's a good series, and if you have a penchant for hardcover books, then it may be worth getting. But on the topic of Alan Moore, and I think what's even more exciting, and we see the beginning of the solicit on page 291, and it goes over into 292 and 293, and this is Cinema Purgatorio.
Yes.
So we know of the film Cinema Paradiso. This is Cinema Purgatorio. And what this is, and in fact, it's on page 291, Alan Moore has a note where he basically explains what this is all about.
Right.
And he harkens back to 2 kind of manifestations of horror comics. One, the classic EC stuff, right, from the 1950s. But then the other is the old black and white magazine-type horror comics that we would get from, most specifically, I think, Warren Publications.
Yeah.
And so it's those 2 things, I think, that he's bringing together to this anthology collection of horror comics. And so this is the brainchild of Alan Moore and Kevin O'Neill. And as Moore states in this one-page letter, which introduces this new series, is that with every issue, both he and O'Neill, and if you don't know who Kevin O'Neill is, then go back to read
League, yeah.
League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, because they do this together. So we have those 2 guys working together again, but in an anthology with a variety of other creators. And in this first issue, you're going to find contributions from not only Moore and O'Neill, but also the aforementioned Garth Ennis, Max Brooks, Kieran Gillen, Christos Gage. So, we have an impressive collection here. And if this is going to be a monthly, I'm excited about this. That's a lot of talent. That's a lot of horror comics. And if it is in the Warren/EC vein, I'm definitely on board.
Yeah. This is the kind of title that if I worked at a comic shop, I would point some of my, customers to.
Yeah.
Because of all the, like you said, the I don't know, the stables. Yeah, pretty remarkable. Someday, I would love to have a long conversation with you about Alan Moore because I've mixed feelings about all of these things. Everything from the horror to Moore to Lovecraft, but definitely a respect for it. I definitely have a respect for it, if not a personal attachment.
Yeah, and I probably feel very similar to you. And without going into a lot of detail, a lot of stuff that Moore has done in association with Avatar, which is a big part of what he does.
Right.
I'm not completely on board with.
Yeah.
Although I really do like Providence, and this looks good. The Cinema Purgatorio. So.
Yeah. I'm probably going to check out that Providence just on your recommendation. I mean, you've been talking it up, and I'm really interested to see it. So I'm going to read that in some form or another. Yeah. Cool.
I go next to 298. Do you have anything before that? Or no, you say you don't have anything until Boom.
That's right. That's
Okay.
right. Let's go 298.
Yeah, and I'll mention this just in passing because these are resolicits, but it's worth mentioning because they're good books, and it is from Big Planet Retrofit Comics.
Yeah.
So on page 298, you have Josh Bayer's Theth, which came out, I think it was 2 years ago, and a selection from it was in last year's Best American Comics,
yeah.
which we discussed. And that is a good book, Theth. And I'm not mispronouncing it. It is Theth.
Right. Theth, right. Yeah.
Exactly. And the one right under that is Kate Leth's. You got a lot of ths in this.
Right.
Is Ink for Beginners, a comic guide to getting tattooed, and it's a one-shot. And in fact, this is one that Kunka and I discussed quite extensively when we did our Big Planet Retrofit comic spotlight last year. I think we mentioned Theth in passing because it was an older title. But they're resolicits, and if you didn't check them out the first time around, I'd recommend that you order them this time.
Yeah, and actually that episode was one of my favorite publisher spotlights because I think y'all really went to the books. Ink for Beginners dissuaded me from getting a finger tattoo. I thought about it because I always take off my wedding ring, not because I'm not thoroughly devoted to my wife, but just it bothers me. So I was like, honey, what if I just tattoo your name on my ring finger? And then one of the pages of Ink for Beginners, Kayla sort of draws the zones of your body and how much pain a tattoo would involve in each of those zones, and the fingers are high pain zones. So I was like, let me take that. But it's good. It's a lot of fun, even if you're not necessarily considering getting a tattoo. Just as comics, it's good. But if you have even the remotest thought, in fact, I think that's a nice entry drug for you to hand to a friend. Somebody thinking about getting a tattoo, you give them a comic and say, hey, check this out.
So what do you have in Boom?
I go to 308. Is that where you're at? Is that something that jumps out for you?
Okay, go ahead with 308 because
Okay.
There's something else I wanted to mention right before that.
Oh, okay.
But I think yours is more exciting.
It's it's kind of one of the featured things in this issue of previews, but it's The Black Dahlia, an adaptation of James Ellroy's novel. So I mentioned earlier my lurking around library shelves when I was a nerdy teenager, and Ellroy's books were one of those. I'd just bring home these huge volumes. My parents would look at me kind of askance. So what are you reading? But it's I think I want to say he wrote the book in the 90s, maybe earlier than that. I don't remember. Do you know James Ellroy's work very well?
No.
Okay.
I don't know when this originally came out. No.
Yeah. So I think his novel, sort of historical novel, came out around that time. A couple things interest me about this adaptation. It's a hardcover. It's written by Ellroy himself with David Fincher, no less, and
Matz,
who did The Killer, right?
Another crime narrative.
Yes, and there's some sample pages on the bottom, art by Miles Hyman, and I like what I see there. I think when I imagined adapting, The Black Dahlia, it felt like the kind of story that there's so much psychologically going on that I'm really interested in how it translates to comics. Now, just looking at these sample pages, there's a good amount of caption boxes, text boxes. And I'm always interested in when you go from novel to graphic novel or whatever you want to call it in comics, how you narrate the interiority or how you depict the interiority that goes on in a novel, because I think it's pretty thick. And there's so much, I think, distinctive voice in the way that Ellroy writes what's going on in characters' heads. And so for that reason alone, not to mention that I think it's the kind of book that I just like, I'm going to get this. I'm going to check it out and kind of see how they do it.
Yeah, now I'm with you on that. I'm excited about that. Another kind of crime narrative that I said was solicited right before that. This is on page 306 that I'm also interested in, and this is one of 6, issue number 1 of Weavers. This is written by Simon Spurrier with art by Dylan Burnett.
Yep.
And basically you have a crime story with a supernatural twist. Mm-hmm. And part of the supernatural twist here is you're dealing with mob gangs, but members of the mob gangs have something to do with a spider that becomes a part of them. And from some of the images here, it seems as if they ingest the spider. I mean, so that's creepy as all get out right there. But it looks interesting. And what got me wasn't so much the name of the creators, although, with Simon Spurrier, I mean, that is interesting. I have to say that I feel a little mixed about the first issue of Cry Havoc. And for those who've listened to recent podcasts, you'll know what I'm talking about.
Yep,
I think that it's pretty good. I just didn't know if it was a complete first issue, at least for me.
Yeah.
But I liked it well enough. So, I think that this could be a good story. But when they say that this in the solicit, this is perfect for fans of Daymon or Scalped. Mm-hmm. I mean, sometimes a lot of these, a cross between this title and this title or this property and that kind of falls flat with me.
Yeah.
I love both Daymon and especially Scalped. So if they're not just pulling this out of their butt, I mean, if this really is something that fans of Scalped and Daymon would find interesting, especially Daymon, because, that turns, more horrific and gets into the macabre, then it may be interesting. I'll probably check out the first issue.
Yeah. I think you've talked me into this. I too, am not generally fond of those elevator pitch, the cross of this and that, but Scalped, you got me. And Cy Spurrier's interesting. I feel like I tend to want to read him in trade because, like you said about Cry Havoc, I think it's hard to judge from a first issue. I think his storytelling style tends to stretch out a little bit, but I probably will check this out too.
Okay, well, I go next to page 325 for my next selections, plural.
Yep.
So you go there next as well?
Yeah, let's go there. Mm-hmm.
Conundrum Press. Now, Conundrum has to be one of my favorite smaller publishers over the past several years. I love most of the stuff that they do. And I say most of the stuff, not because I've read something of theirs that I didn't like. It's just I don't read everything they do.
Right.
But I probably would love everything if I read it. But everything that they have listed here, and there are 3 solicits, I'm definitely interested in. And they tempt me to want to do another Conundrum Spotlight.
Yeah, I think that it was a while ago, right? They were one of your early ones?
It was last year.
Oh, was it? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
It may seem like a long time ago, but it was last year. We did so many of those last year. And I want to start with something that I think you're really interested in as well, and that is 20 by 20, 20 years of Conundrum Press.
Yeah. To be honest, I didn't pay much attention to Conundrum until your publisher spotlight. I don't want to raise my expectations too high, but that Drawn and Quarterly 25 collection last year was phenomenal. And I don't think that's exactly what this is, but I think the interweaving of a history of a press like Conundrum, which started in Montreal, I think, in the mid '90s, with pieces of work, and this one says 220 pages. Yeah, I'm going to be interested in it as a kind of immersion into what Conundrum has been about. But I think you could probably speak more to that than me. Yeah.
The artists that they list in the solicit, and of course they just mention 3 names and they say and many more, so they're only 3. But all 3 of these I'm big fans of. Joe Ullman, Dakota McFadzean, and David Collier. 2 of those I've interviewed for the podcast, or the Comics Alternative in one form or another. And so I love their work, and everyone else that I've read in Conundrum Press I've been impressed with. So I like this, and it's interesting that you used as a point of comparison the Drawn and Quarterly 25 anniversary volume that came out last year. Now, it's interesting in that I didn't think about this as a point of comparison, but as soon as you said it, that made perfect sense. This, I think, the way that the solicit reads, is going to be very different. And one of the, I don't want to say problems, because it wasn't a problem. I'm with you in thinking that 25-year anniversary of Drawn and Quarterly was a phenomenal book.
Yeah.
It didn't strike me in the way that it struck others. And in particular, I want to mention Andy Kunka. Andy, that was one of his top 10 books of 2015.
Right.
And I think he even hinted that was probably his top. If he had to list a number one book of last year, that was it.
Yeah.
And he had assumed that would be in my top 10, and it wasn't. And so when we got to the very last title, and he said that his was the Drawn and Quarterly 25-year anniversary, and mine was something else entirely.
Yeah, he fully
Dharma
expected
Punks.
you to say the same thing, right?
Yeah, and he even mentioned that on the show.
Yeah.
And he was asking me why it wasn't even in my honorable mention. And I'll tell you why is I think that it's a hybrid work, and I have no problem with that whatsoever.
Right.
And for those who don't know about this hefty tome, and it is, I mean, it's a really big book.
Yeah.
It has a lot of original comics. It has a lot of reprint comics. It also has a lot of prose. Some of those pro pieces are by creators themselves. Some are by critics or scholars who are writing about a particular creator or a title or Drawn and Quarterly in general. And for what it is, I think it's great.
Yeah.
Now, do I consider that a comic or a graphic novel? Well, yes and no. And I think because of its hybrid form, that made me disqualify it for one of my favorites of 2015. And that may sound a little nitpicky on my part. Brings me back to this 20 by 20 years of Conundrum Press.
Yeah.
This seems to be something entirely different in that this is not going to be a hybrid medium text. This seems to be all comics and no reprints, because from the solicit, the publisher, Andy Brown, great guy, by the way, and I sounded like Trump there, great guy, by the way. It's true. It's true.
He's huge.
He's huge. Okay, now you're sounding like Bernie Sanders, but huge.
True. Yeah, he does that too.
Yeah. But they're taking, he says, Andy Brown, the publisher, has asked one author or artist for each year of the press who had a book out that year to contribute something new that represented Conundrum. Okay, so there could be prose in here because it says author or artist, but we'll see. But the fact that this is going to be all new material, that impresses me.
Yeah, that's true. And it is different from the Drawn and Quarterly piece. I wonder if there will be, how much sort of history of the publisher there will be. For that, I do recommend folks listen to the episode. But it is new work, and that's exciting to me. Yeah. That's exciting to me.
I hope that there's not much history in this book, 20 by 20, because even though, again, I have no problem with what Drawn and Quarterly did, I think the fact that the book's raison d'etre was this looking back. Yeah. I mean, not completely just looking back. Of course, there was some looking forward as well. But it was a tribute to the past 25 years, and rightly so. I'm hoping that this is different, that this is new material that represents not only Conundrum's past, but also its potential for where it is going from here on in.
Yeah.
And I didn't get that same sense from the Drawn and Quarterly.
From the Drawn and Quarterly, which was very retrospective, very nostalgic. Adrian Tom and pictures from 20 years ago.
Yeah. But the other two solicits in Conundrum on this page, I think, are also really interesting. Did either of these really grab your attention?
Yeah, I've read all the Paul books. In fact, I've given them out as gifts. People accuse me of a kind of narcissism. You gave me a comic book about Paul. But it's so the Paul books are, to me, they're great comics to give to non-comics readers. Folks in your book club.
And this is by Michelle Ragliati?
Yeah, thanks for saying it.
Or Rabagliati, yeah.
Rabagliati, yeah. I'm looking forward to that one. I'm not familiar.
This one is Paul Up North.
Yes.
Because Paul is a series of books, and each one has a particular title to kind of distinguish it. And this one, Paul Up North. Yeah.
And Up North, it says the action takes place just before the Summer Olympics in Montreal, 75-76. So, not a Canadian, sort of dream about being a Canadian sometimes, honestly, especially when the politics are as disconcerting as they are right now. But I love the sense of place that's in those books. So, Paul has a summer job. Paul moves out. Those are some of the titles. Yeah.
And then the other one that's solicited here is another French language narrative, Pierre Muriel's Blackbird. Blackbird follows a band of skateboarding anarchists, and right there, that got my attention, who are making a zine about their lives. The problem is, in Muriel's dystopian near-future self-publishing, zines has become a crime. Through media stunts, thrilling chase scenes, and some real political activism, Blackbird and its cast of characters reflect the social dynamics of a counterculture. It also gives readers a taste of the new French underground in comics.
Huh. How did I miss this? This looks good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he, I think, is a relatively new writer, at least to English speakers, because I was looking him up earlier and not much, at least on Amazon.
Right. Cool. I'm going to check this out.
So, where do you go next?
Let's see. I'm at Dover 350.
Okay, before we get this, I want to mention something, I don't know, kind of in passing and also as a question. And this is in the Dynamite section on pages 330 and 331. And this is issue number 1 of Smoosh.
Yeah.
Now, the way they're describing it, this is a phenomena. Until I read this solicit, I didn't know what the hell Smoosh was. I'm still not sure what Smoosh is, but it has something to do with YouTube. And when I see the solicit, it says, see what the 38 million combined subscribers on YouTube and 31 million social followers are raving about in this brand new 6-issue series from Dynamite. Okay, so I can tell you right now, as a new reader, I am extremely pissed off and put off because now I feel alienated. Okay? And so the fact that I feel out of the loop and that the publicists who wrote this solicit make me feel like an outsider, I'm going to be less apt to pick up issue number 1.
We're not the target demo.
Right.
Yeah,
and I'm okay with that, but but do you know about Smoosh?
I don't. Is it Smoosh or Smosh or is it
Smush? Is it Smush? S-M-O-C-H or S-H? Smosh?
yeah.
Smosh?
Yeah.
I don't know. What
Yeah,
the hell? I
yeah.
mean, I don't care. I'm not going to look this up. Why did I even take time to mention this? Okay, let's move on.
Yeah. We can move on from that.
Okay, so that
We'll back away slowly.
That's right. So 2 rants and 1 meltdown so far for Derek. And you say you go to page what now?
Drawn and Quarterly.
Okay.
Yeah, 351, 352.
Okay.
Yeah. Did you have some stuff before it?
No. The Dover and Drawn and Quarterly. Yeah, that's that page.
Yeah. So, no, there's a David Hahn Private Beach Complete Collection. Again, one of these blind spots. How did I miss that? But I'm glad I'll be able to kind of catch up on it all collected. And have you done coverage of David Hahn?
No, or no, not this title. And I don't think we've covered him at all. In I mean, I've mentioned him, but we've never reviewed anything that he's done on the show. Oh, no, I take that back. There was one title that Self-Made Hero put out that he did the art on.
Yeah.
And I'm blanking on the title.
Trying to remember what that is. Yeah.
But I think that's the only one. But for those who aren't familiar, Private Beach was an unfinished series that came out in the early 2000s from Slave Labor Graphics.
Right.
And apparently now we have the wrap-up of that series that was left hanging, so this is the complete collection.
Yeah.
And it's published by Dover. And this is interesting. We've mentioned this on many preview shows. The thing that's so fascinating about Dover Publications is that what they solicit in the catalog are titles that had been published by other publishers years before, have gone out of print, and are now being represented or repackaged by Dover.
Yeah.
And that's a great service.
I appreciate that, especially for presses like Slave Labor.
Yeah.
Which had a lot of interesting, really unique work. They're actually local. In fact, I don't think this is disclosing too much. My wife was Dan Votto, who was the head of Slave Labor and responsible quite a bit for the Alternative Press Expo around here. She was his middle school English teacher.
Wow.
Yeah, he was a really nice kid. But we got to sort of visit them at one point, Slave Labor, and just some interesting work, So I'm glad that they're getting, some of that stuff is seeing new life.
Yeah, I used to like a lot of stuff that Slave Labor did.
Yeah.
Also, Amazing Inc. Is I think one in the
Amazing.
same. Amazing
Yep.
Inc.
Yep.
But I have to tell you, over the past 5 years, they've done less that I'm interested in.
Yeah. I'm not too sure about the insides of what's going on over there, but yeah.
But anyway, Private Beach, the complete collection by David Hahn, definitely worth checking out. Now, which of the solicits under Drawn and Quarterly interest you?
Moomin Valley, Club Life in Moomin Valley. Are you looking at that too?
No, I'm looking at the one below it because, in fact, Moomin is one of those titles that I'm interested in, but because I haven't read any Moomin yet, I feel intimidated. It's like, God, where do I jump on board? It's like someone coming to Love and Rockets for the first time,
Yes.
And then all of a sudden, let's say the latest issue, the annual issue of Love and Rockets that'll be coming out, not too long from now. Do I start reading that because I haven't read Love and Rockets before? And there's that intimidation factor. Will you be able to understand it? Is there so much of a backstory and so much exposition that there's no way that you could appreciate what's going on with the most recent one? I feel somewhat like that with Moomin, even though I know it's a classic.
Yeah. I mean, I hope you do have a chance to try it out. I feel like as far as accessibility without having read the entire oeuvre, it's probably a little bit more like to me it's the less Love and Rockets, which I also love and which I also sort of have to read the whole catalog of, than it's a weird comparison, but like Jason. You read something and it's going to be disorienting even if you're familiar with it somewhat, but it's just kind of a worthwhile disorientation. It's good.
Yeah. That makes sense. I think that's a good comparison. Now, I've read parodies of Moomin, but not Moomin.
Yeah. So I'll be there. I'll be in this one. Yeah.
But the one underneath it is, I guess, the other new title under Drawn and Quarterly, and that is Secret Times by Keith Jones. And I think I recognize the art, but I've never read anything by Keith Jones before. Have you?
No, me neither. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And this one looks interesting, but I have to tell you that one of the reasons why it looks interesting is in context because it's Drawn and Quarterly. And I think I'm willing to give Drawn and... It's kind of like with Fantagraphics, right? Almost everything they come out with, I want to try it.
Yeah. I feel the same way, even if it doesn't wind up landing. I'm going to give it a shot.
But there's more in the Fantagraphics section that I'm interested in. If you want to move over there, unless you have something else in
Nope.
Drawn and Quarterly.
Nope, I'm with you. Fantagraphics,
yeah. Well, there's the aforementioned Hip Hop Family Tree. Issue number 10 we're already up to. Wow, geez.
Yeah.
Time do fly.
Yes, it does.
Right below that is something really interesting, and this is Matt Fury's Boys Club. Now, this is, I'm assuming, a reprint of the Buenaventura's, the publisher's earlier Boys Club. And I think that there were 2 books of Boys Club from Buenaventura that came out. And I don't even know if Buenaventura is around anymore, so maybe that's why we have what I'm assuming to be a single volume of Fury's Boys Club.
Yeah, I hadn't read this work. 180 pages, black and white, and I don't know. Do you know? I mean, what do you know about the sort of background of the work?
I read the first installment from Buenaventura a long time ago, and so I'm blanking on what exactly my experience was in reading it. It's a little different. It's a strange kind of offbeat humor.
Right.
They mention words such as laconic psychedelia, childlike enchantment, and drug-fueled hedonism. Yeah, that makes sense to me. Things are starting to come back to me now.
Okay.
But
like an old drug trip.
Yeah, and I'm not even a druggie, so...
Right. No, we have comics for that. That's what we're here for.
Yeah.
No, I may check that out. My eye is drawn to the top. Should I talk about Peanuts?
Sure.
So, it has pride of place in my household. We've been collecting this whole run of Complete Peanuts that they've been doing. They're gorgeous. They're marvelous. You know, my daughter and my wife and I have been reading these, and it's coming to an end. I'll be honest, I almost teared up a little bit when I saw this solicit. It's the Complete Peanuts volume. I don't even know what number it is, but they've been doing, since Peanuts started, 1950 to 52, 53 to 54. And they're wrapping it up, and it's been a phenomenal run. The designs have been gorgeous. The introductions by, all kinds of folks, Garrison Keillor to, I guess, unfortunately, now Bill Cosby at one point. And I just got to say, and I've written a little bit about this, walking through 50 years of Peanuts has been one of the, I think, landmark comics experiences and reading experiences of my life. I credit my daughter's, really fast early literacy to Peanuts. We talk about it all the time. So for this, if you're listening, Fantagraphics, thank you from the bottom of my heart. And it's what's interesting. This last volume, you got Sally on the cover. Introduction by Barack Obama.
I know. Geez, you were talking about people who have. So you said Garrison Keillor. He's kind of a big name, but
bigger
Barack
names
Obama.
Yeah. Right. Yes. To step aside. Here comes the president. So I'll be interested to hear what he has to say. And I think that last decade, especially the last 5 years of Peanuts, is kind of underappreciated. I mean, it gets really funny, and there's just so much poignancy. He doesn't write with those last few strips. Those last months of his strips. You can tell he's kind of winding down, but there's just a sort of winter of my life and a childlikeness that brings me back to some of the best years of Peanuts, and I just love these years. I mean, I can't say enough about them. So I know Andy's going to be there. Andy Wolverton's going to be there for this. This release is going to be a kind of a celebration to me.
Yeah. I'm like you. I'm a fan of Peanuts, but and of course I've read Peanuts, but I haven't gotten any of these Fantagraphics collections.
Yeah.
And I remember when they first came out, and I thought, oh, it'd be great to get this, and then I didn't. And then the next volume or two came out, and I thought, okay, well, there are only about 3 or 4 out right now. That's doable. But after that, it just became, again, the word intimidating.
Yeah.
At what point can I justify now the expense of getting all of these? I can't.
Totally.
So I'll let others like you and Andy Wolverton luxuriate in this.
Yeah.
But I think this is great, though, that it's finally wrapping up, and it is bittersweet.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
Yeah.
Well, one of these days I'll ship you a giant box of them, a little thank you gift.
Oh, that would be a big thank you gift.
That's right. Yeah. Big, a lot of fun. Yeah.
But the other things, not everything, but most other things in the Fantagraphics section, the new solicits, I think, are worth mentioning. And one, this is right under the Peanuts solicit, Real Deal Comics by Lawrence Raw Dog Hubbard and H.P. McElwee. And apparently this is kind of a lost classic, and I wasn't aware of this.
I wasn't either. Mm-mm.
Yeah. But
how did I miss Raw Dog Hubbard?
Yeah. It says, join GC, Ace Brogan, and Slick Willie in their adventures in the Hood, where everyday tasks require a stand or back down attitude to survive. Real Deal magazine was created in the 1990s and features convicts, hustlers, drug addicts, crack whores, car thieves, and murderers in a satiric depiction of the madness that occurs in the urban center of America. Real Deal has achieved cult status over the years, but has never been collected until now. And of course, there's going to be the until now there.
That's right.
So, okay, it looks interesting. And then on the facing page is something I'm really excited about, and this is Noah Van Sciver's Disquiet.
Yes.
In this, I'm a big fan of Noah's. He's been on the podcast a few times, once for an interview, once at a con. I think we've had him on for a con maybe 2 times.
Yeah,
at
I
cons.
think so. Mm-hmm.
And also we've discussed a variety of his works on review shows. So this collects a lot of his shorter work, such as The Death of Elijah Lovejoy, The Lizard Who Laughed, Punks versus Lizards, and other short works of his. This is good. And you could never get enough Noah Van Sciver. And I think that it's impossible to get to run out of Noah Van Sciver because the guy publishes all the time.
Yeah. I didn't read anything until Fancy Bukowski, to be honest. But I'm looking forward to this one. It's going to be a good way to catch up with him.
Yeah. And then right under that is something interesting, and maybe I am not remembering correctly, but I remember there being Josh Simmons's Jessica Farm several years ago. And now we have solicited Jessica Farm Book 1, Jessica Farm Book 2, and I went on Amazon when I saw this solicit and was like, was there a Jessica Farm 2 that followed up the first Jessica Farm that I'm just forgetting about, and I couldn't find it.
Yeah.
And maybe it's still there, but I'm not finding it. It's different covers, but the solicit for Jessica Farm, the older edition that came out several years ago, and the solicit for this Jessica Farm, both in the catalog and on Amazon, are very similar. So in the page count of Jessica Farm Book 1, the new edition, and the original Jessica book, or Jessica Farm, seem to be similar. So I don't think that this is taking an original one volume and breaking it up into two.
Right.
Is this a second volume that just hadn't been published and now they're coming out with a new edition of the first?
That's what it sounds like, because the first one, 96 pages, right? It's kind of what we're looking at for the first volume. And then the last sentence says they're the beginning of a life-spanning project which will continue for 50 years until Simmons amasses a 600-page body of work. So I'm guessing book 1 is the reprint of the 2008, and then the book 2 is continuing the 600-page body of work that Simmons is working on. So,
wow.
Yeah. I don't know. Like you said, with Drawn and Quarterly and Fantagraphics, at some point I will check these out. You know, whether it's picking them up or pre-ordering them, or the library, or that crafty thing Fantagraphics does with those Fantabucks. Did you get in on that?
No, I didn't, because sometimes I get review copies of Fantagraphics books. Sometimes I get them on my own, and so I thought it all comes out in the wash.
Got it.
I'm not going to get the Fantabucks.
No, they got me. I'm a total sucker.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay, so those who are listening to this podcast and looking at their watches are probably realizing that this is going to be a longer than usual episode, and that's because there's a lot packed into the March Previews catalog. And if you're starting to wear down a little bit like both Paul and I are, then you need a little caffeine in your life, and a great place to get coffee in your caffeine fix is Just Coffee Co-op. Remember, as we pointed out at the top of the show, they're one of the sponsors for this episode of the Comics Alternative. They have coffee that is socially conscious. It's 100% fair trade, it's shade grown, and it's all organic certified. Everything is roasted in small batches. If you go there, check out their great coffee, teas, and chocolates, and just load your cart. Load it up. Get a lot of that coffee going there. And they have very good varieties of different kinds of coffee. After you do that, make sure at checkout you use our coupon code COMICS, COMICS. That'll give you 10% off of your order. Shipping is always free. There is no minimum order. So go to their website, justcoffee.coop. That's justcoffee, one word, .coop. Load up on coffee, tea, and chocolates. Put in our coupon code COMICS. You get 10% off. You help the Comics Alternative. Everyone is happy. It's a win-win-win situation. How's that?
So, yeah, coffee is good, and I'm supercharged to push through the rest of this thing.
Okay, yeah. In fact, right after doing that solicit, I think I got some vicarious caffeine thing going.
Nice.
So it's a caffeine suggestion here.
Just talking about justcoffee.coop.
Yeah.
Gets us going.
Yeah. Now, as we often find in the catalog, right after Fantagraphics is another favorite of ours, and that is First Second.
First Second, yep.
Yeah. So what in the First Second March section thrills you?
Yeah, so I actually got to read in advance of Hippopotamister. I've never said that out loud until now. Hippopotamister by John Green. And it's fun. Yeah, I love First Second, and I just love the way that they span genre, and this is just, it's good. I recommend it.
Yeah, I only know what I see on the front cover, and it looks fun. And it's an all-age book?
Yeah, I don't think they advertise it that way. I don't remember there being anything that's inappropriate for a a young reader, a kid reader. In fact, I thought about when it comes out, I'm going to try it with my daughter. So yeah, all ages, I'd say.
Well, Previews has the kid-friendly sticker next to the solicit. So
there it is. Yeah.
And then right below that is the Women in Comics sticker for Lucy Kisley's Something New, Tales from a Makeshift Bride.
Yeah, that'll be interesting.
Yeah.
Have you read her sort of her travel journal comics?
No, I haven't, and I haven't even read Relish that came out a few years ago, but I know a lot of people really like her work, and this seems interesting as well. It is what seems to be with a lot of her comics. There's nothing really grandiose about the premise. It's more mundane and everyday, and you have something similar going on here. So this is the story of, I guess it's autobiographical, of what happened with someone that she had earlier broken up with, coming back to her a few years later, and then proposing, and then them getting into the ins and outs, the chaos of planning the wedding.
That's right. The wedding, the whole giant industry of wedding planning. So if that's an experience that you've been through, or somebody that's been I think we've all been adjacent to that experience at least at some point. So I'll be interested in her take on this. I've enjoyed her books quite a lot, so this will be good. Yeah.
Now, after that, I have something on page 378. If you have anything before.
No, 378. Koyama?
Yeah, Koyama.
Yeah.
And I'm not familiar with Ben Sears, but he's got a book that's going to be coming out not too long from now by Koyama Press called Night Air. It says, boundless adventures of an unruly boy, his rational robot, and their great gadgets filled with fantastic science stuff.
Yeah.
So right there, that sounds like fun.
Yeah, I love this cover. I've seen some of his work online, and it's kind of reflective of his style. But it's sort of cartoony. A lot of fun, a lot of detail, bright. I'm gonna be into this too. Yeah. From there, I'm to Self-Made Hero. I don't know if you have anything sooner.
Yeah, if you turn the page, I'll mention maybe more in passing than anything. This is on page 380 under NBM. It's a Treasury of Murder hardcover set. And, we have interviewed Rick Geary on the Comics Alternative twice before. We've discussed one or two of his other books on review shows. And we absolutely love his murder mystery or treasury of, let's say, Victorian murder or 20th century murder. Let's just say that Rick Geary is great when it comes to murder, but in a good way, and in representing murder in comics form, and especially classic legendary murder mysteries. And if you haven't read any of his treasury of murder books, this is a great way of getting on board. So for $39.99, and I'm sure deep discounts from Discount Comic Book Service, you can read about, among other famous murders, the Lincoln assassination, other true crimes. In fact, they don't really mention many of these.
No.
The Lover's Lane murder. Now that I'm looking at the solicit, it dawns on me they should have listed some of the murders that are the stories that are embedded in this treasury, but they don't, huh?
Yeah, I wonder if the victims in some of these stories, there's one in early Hollywood, aren't as known as, say, Abraham Lincoln.
Yeah,
who's
I don't know.
On the cover.
Now on the cover they do have what looks like a band that goes around. It says including Lover's Lane, famous player, and the murder of Lincoln.
Yeah.
That's only 3. So maybe it's just those 3 in this book, because on the next page is a 20th century murder book, and that is The Murder of Stanford White, which we've discussed on the podcast before. That's really good.
Yeah.
Okay, so
cool.
This treasury, this hardcover treasury, is not as big as I thought it was originally, but definitely worth checking out.
Yeah, 240 pages, pretty hefty. Yeah, good stuff.
And then a couple of other things before Self-Made Hero. On page 391 under Pantheon
is
Evie Wildes and Joe Summers' Everything is Teeth, a graphic memoir. And I'm not familiar with this, and I'm not familiar with the work of these guys. Are you?
I'm not either, and I would have brought it up, except I didn't know anything. It's just when Pantheon puts something out,
that's
something to pay attention to. Yeah.
That's the reason why I dog-eared this page is, because certain publishers, kind of like Fantagraphics and Drawn and Quarterly, they have a certain cachet, right?
Yep.
So, and they have a reputation, and they have a history behind them. So chances are they're going to put out something of good quality, whether it's up your alley or not. Yeah. And I think when it comes to trade publishers, Pantheon is at the top of the heap.
Absolutely.
When it comes to comics.
This week they have Sonny Liu's book and Charlie Chan Hawkchai coming out. And
as we record that is going to be released in the U.S. tomorrow, March 1st.
Yes, very exciting. Very exciting.
And in fact, we're going to be talking with Sonny later this week. I believe we'll get that interview up about this.
Awesome. We're all going to look forward to that.
But anyway, even though neither of us know about the creators Evie Wyld and Joe Summer and this title, Everything is Teeth, a graphic memoir, I think it's worth checking out.
Yeah. A little girl in Australia captivated by sharks, looks good.
Yeah. And then on the next page, I do want to give a heads up to PS Art Books, because one of our devoted listeners, Rainer Koschnick, is one of his favorite publishers, and several months ago he mentioned the fact that we never talk about the PS Arts book, especially their Harvey reprints, their horror, and he said you guys ought to, and so every now and again we do. And I don't have any of these. I know Rainer gets about all of them. And he swears by them, so they're definitely worth checking out. And he has good taste.
Yeah.
And you know how I know he has good taste? Rainer does. He is one of our Patreon supporters, one of our earliest.
Yeah. And I got to say, I'm happy to count myself among them.
That's right.
Support the Comics Alternative on Patreon. Patreon.com. Check it out.
Thanks for the plug.
Well, actually, we do appreciate our community. And if you've listened this far, you're truly one of the devoted members of our community.
Yeah, as we said, this is kind of a longer episode.
Yeah. But,
so let's move on. So now we get to Self-Made Hero.
Two solicits. And is this a resolicit for Agatha? Or is that new?
I don't remember seeing it, but maybe it is a resolicit that I'm just not aware of.
I'd heard of it, and I don't know if I'd heard of it because it was anticipating this, but Agatha, the Real Life of Agatha Christie, written by Anne Martinetti, Guillaume Lebeau, and art by Alexandre Frank. And it's a life of Agatha Christie. And if you're a mystery nut like me, you gotta be interested in that. And next to that, the Art Master series, the third volume, Edvard Munch. I'm not much of an art historian, so to me, these books are my education. What better way to learn about art than and artists than comics? I mean, I think that's a really interesting thing that's going on with that. So I think I'm going to check those out.
Yeah, that would seem like a no-brainer. And we've discussed a lot of self-made hero books on Comics Alternative in the past. We've even had a publisher spotlight devoted to self-made hero, but we've yet to discuss any in the Art Master series.
Yeah. So I'd like to see them. Yeah.
And then after Self-Made Hero, I only have maybe one or two others. Do you have anything?
Me too. Actually, I'd narrow it to just one.
Okay, and where's that?
Rules for Dating My Daughter, which is not for a while. It's 427, so if you have anything sooner.
Okay, right before that is on page 423, Toon Graphics. There are a couple of titles that are solicited here, or I guess a few, but one in particular that I'm interested in, and that is Sea Change by Frank Viva. I'm not familiar with the work of Viva, but from the look of his cover art, this seems like something that you would find with much smaller presses like Alternative Comics or Conundrum or, let's say, Koyama. It just really looks interesting, and the premise is, and this is an all-age, kid-friendly book. Of course, it's Toon Graphics, of course.
Right.
So, one summer can change your whole life. As soon as school let out, Elliot's parents send him to the very edge of the world, a fishing village in a remote part of Nova Scotia. And what does the small town of Port Acani have to offer? Maggots, bullies, and grumpy old men. But along the way, Elliot discovers much more. A hidden library, starry nights, and a mysterious girl named Mary Beth.
Yeah, that looks good.
Sounds good.
I can't believe I missed this. I got to shout out to Toon Graphics. Those books have been awesome. That whole series, my daughter and I have just devoured them. We just read Nadja Spiegelman written, and I can't remember the name of the Spanish artist, but a phenomenal work about the subway in New York City. Yeah,
NYC subway, was that it?
Something like that. NYC for sure. But that whole line has been just great fun to read with my daughter. And, there's just so much brilliant comics art, some brilliant sequential stuff. And we sit and analyze and just enjoy the stories. They're so good.
Yeah.
So, yeah. I should pay more attention to these for sure.
And now I think we get to where both you and I conclude our highlights for the March preview finally, and that is on page 426 under Uncivilized Books.
Yes, yeah, maybe appropriately for the curmudgeons to highlight,
both of whom have daughters.
Yeah, that's right. Yep.
And so this is you because the other one I want to mention, but you have one by Mike Dawson.
Yeah, Mike Dawson's Rules for Dating My Daughter. It says he uses visual storytelling to offer original, compelling, and funny commentary on fatherhood, gun rights, the gender of toys, and staying sane in a world where school shootings and Disney princesses get equal billing. So I supported this book on Kickstarter a while back, just almost completely on that pitch, on that premise. Even if it winds up being something where I don't land on the same page as Mr. Dawson, it's just, as a father, I love that comics talk about this stuff, more and more. And I'm just going to be interested to see this. Folks should check it out for sure.
Now, see, I didn't know about this being on Kickstarter. I have to say my experience with searching for comics projects on Kickstarter is spotty at times. Sometimes I'll search it avidly, and sometimes I'll let months go without really looking. Now, was this something that Mike Dawson put up as a Kickstarter campaign, or was this a Kickstarter campaign from Uncivilized?
I don't know when Uncivilized came along, but it was Dawson, and it was last year, I think around the middle of last year. And I think they wrapped it up in the fall of last year. So,
and one of the reasons why I'm asking is over the past year, I've been going to Uncivilized Books, their website, and getting and pre-ordering their certain seasonal catalogs.
Right.
And so you pay a certain amount, and if you do that ahead of time, then you'll get the books, plus Tom Kaczynski, the publisher, will throw in several mini-comics for free.
Huh. Oh.
Yeah. So I've done that, and I noticed last month, I think was the last time I looked on their website, which is, we record this, was January.
Yeah.
They didn't have one for the most recent releases, and I'm wondering if that's something that Kaczynski has discontinued. And so that's why I ask about the Kickstarter issue.
Yeah, that would be too bad, because I love those kinds of programs from publishers.
Yeah. But I mentioned earlier that Conundrum is one of my favorite small publishers. Another one that I've discovered over the past few years is Uncivilized. That's another one.
Yeah.
And then the other solicit in the Uncivilized section of this catalog is by Roman Muradov, and that is Jacob Blatters and the State of the Art. Did you read Muradov's Lost in a Sense that came out last year?
No, I didn't. I didn't get to see that one. Mm-hmm.
That was published by Nobrow, and I really liked that. I think it was Wolverton and I. Was it a year or a year and a half ago that that came out? But we did a publisher spotlight on Nobrow, and Wolverton and I discussed that among other recent releases at the time from Nobrow, and we both really liked Lost in a Sense. But the thing that we wondered about in terms of Lost in a Sense is that the tone in places was dark, and I'm talking about the art, the visuals, to where it had a murky feel to it. And maybe in places the murkiness was intended for the story's tone.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm convinced of that at all. But other than that, I really liked that book when we discussed it on our Nobrow Publisher Spotlight. So I'm looking forward to Jacob Blatters and the State of the Art.
Yeah. Yeah.
So unless there is any outlier that either you or I are forgetting, then I think we've gone all the way through the March Previews catalog.
I'm sure we missed something, but I think that was a pretty good walkthrough.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
You know, it's always fun to go through previews, and sometimes the episodes are shorter, and sometimes, such as this one, they're longer. You know, month by month, sometimes they're really packed, sometimes they're not packed as much with things that, you know, we would want to recommend to our listeners. But it's always fun to go through the catalog, no matter how long the episode turns out to be.
Yeah, and it's great fun. And if you've been listening this long, again, thank you for welcoming me and my voice into this conversation. I, you know, have just derived a ton of, you know, pleasure and learning from listening to these. So it's fun to be here. Thanks for having me aboard.
And let's hope this is not your last episode.
Sure.
Yeah.
That would be fun. I'd enjoy that.
That'd be great.
Yeah.
So yeah, and if you want to comment on the state of the podcast now with Paul, then, you know, hey, you can definitely let us know. But before you send us any messages, we strongly recommend that you check out many of the titles that we just discussed on the website of our sponsor, Discount Comic Book Service. Please go to dcbservice.com. You're going to find some unbelievable specials. You will not be disappointed. And then after you do check out those prices, then you can get in touch with us and let us know what you think about Paul as a podcaster.
Be kind.
Yes. And how curmudgeon I can be at times. If you go to the website, comicsalternative.com, you'll see that you can leave us a voice message through the wonders of SpeakPipe. It's very simple and easy to use. Or you can contact us the old-fashioned way. Our phone number is 415-3-COMICS. That's 415-326-6427.
You can also email us, two guys at comicsalternative.com. Or you can email me directly at paul@comicsalternative.com or Derek at comicsalternative.com. And let me just say, if you are one of those listeners out there in the community, and we count you as part of the community, especially if you've listened this far, you're a dedicated fan, do reach out to us. It's something that I did, I'd say about a year and a half ago, and I don't regret it at all. And so this is your reading community. That's what we aim to be. So let us know and give us some feedback and be part of the conversation.
That's great. Yeah. And emailing is definitely the way to go. But if you feel more comfortable with other means of digital communication, you can reach us via various social media outlets such as Twitter, Facebook, Tumblr, Instagram, Google+, Goodreads, Pinterest, and YouTube. We have accounts at all of those places. You can find the podcast through iTunes, so subscribe there. You can also stream us on Stitcher, and you can see us on TuneIn as well. And you can find, as always, every single one of our podcast episodes, as well as the reviews and the comics-related commentary that Paul edits at the blog. And that's at the website, comicsalternative.com. So there you go. Your first episode complete.
I've broken through the barrier.
That's right. You're no longer a podcast virgin.
That's right.
At least where we're concerned.
I was trying to put it delicately, but
yeah.
That's right.
Okay. So thank you guys for listening to our March preview show, and we will be back next week with more comics to review. Until then, I'm Derek.
And I'm Paul.
We'll see you later.
Bye-bye.